Good afternoon. I'm Keith Nelson, Vice Chair of this committee, and welcome to the CBOC meeting for January 29th, 2021. If you'd like to view this in Spanish, there's a link below. The CBOC will continue respecting orders from the Governor of California, the Health Officer of the County of Riverside, and guidelines of the Centers for Disease Control related to maintaining public health and safety at this time. Consistent with these orders and guidelines, this meeting will be held online only, and there will be no physical meeting locations open to the public. The committee encourages members of the public to join the meeting electronically, and you will find information on the committee agenda regarding how to submit your comments. The agenda can be found at www.riversideunified.org in the Measure O Citizens Bond Oversight Committee webpage. If you join by phone as needed, dial and the number is 1-669-900-688-6833. And the same webinar ID, 844-3511-1272. I would like to introduce Assistant Superintendent Sergio San Martin to provide this message in Spanish.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Good evening, everyone. Muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la reunión de la Junta del Comité de la Comunidad sobre Bonos del 29 de enero del 2021. Si gustan ver esta reunión en español, sigan el enlace de abajo en la descripción. La Junta CBOC continuará respetando las recientes órdenes del gobernador de California, el oficial de salud del condado de Riverside, y las órdenes del Centro de Control de Enfermedades. Esto es en relación con el mantenimiento de la salud y la seguridad pública. De acuerdo con estas órdenes y guías, esta reunión se llevará a cabo solo en transmisión en línea y no habrá un lugar físico de reunión abierto al público. Le recomendamos a los miembros del público que se unan a la reunión electrónicamente. Puede encontrar la información en el orden del día referente a cómo presentar comentarios públicos, el cual puede encontrar en nuestro sitio de línea en www.riversideunified.org. Muchas gracias. Back to you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. I'd like to start the meeting with the introduction of members and welcome. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Keith Nelson, Vice Chair and local parent advocate. Mr. Bristol?
My name is David Bristow. I'm an attorney and live and work here in Riverside. I have 3 children in Riverside Unified School District.
Great. Tina Grande Field, is she on? No. Diane Quasman? Mr. Terry Welling?
Terry Walling. I'm a downtown resident and a property owner downtown.
Mr. Bob Garcia.
Bob Garcia, community leader here in Casablanca, and I'm the senior citizen representative.
Thank you. Mr. Tom Evans.
Good afternoon, Tom Evans, community member.
Miss Sarah Simpson, is she on?
Hi, my name is Sarah Simpson, and I have 2 children in Riverside Unified Schools.
Perfect. Miss Laura Martin.
Laura Martin, business owner, Aquatic Solutions Pool and Spa Service in Riverside, California. I am also a parent of a school-age child in the RUSD area, not at the RSD school at this time, but she is of school age.
Miss Marilyn Robinson. Okay. Mr. Armando De La Hoya. I hope I said your name right.
Amanda De La O.
Yes, sorry.
No worries. Hello, my name is Amanda De La O. I'm from the community of Casablanca. I'm a member of the CAG. And I'm from the Ministries of Victory Outreach. I have 3 children, 2 are in RUSD, and 3 grandchildren, which is one's in Riverside Unified School District.
Perfect. Mr. Martin DeCampo? I don't see him on. And Mr. Art Alcaraz? No. Okay, that concludes the introduction of our members. And again, welcome to you all. Thank you for attending. Thank you, staff. Right now, we'll be looking for public comment on items that are not on the agenda. I'm not sure if there's anyone in the queue to make public comment.
Mr. Nelson, I'm going to go ahead and just read a script to provide instructions to those who would like to provide comments. So
Okay.
if you are a member of the public who has joined the Zoom call today to provide public input for topics that are not already on the agenda, you may now enter the queue until the item begins by using the raise hand function if you are logged in using a computer, or *9 if you're using your phone to call in. Once again, the queue is only open for public input at this time for items not on the agenda. All of the members of the public wishing to speak on an item on the agenda will be invited to enter the queue prior to the item beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see I skipped one member who was muted. Diane Melman, introduce herself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Diane Quasman. I have one child at RUSD and I am the PTA representative.
Perfect, thank you. And we'll wait a minute for any public comment.
Nelson, we have no one that has raised their hand for public comments.
Okay, great, thank you. So now we'll move on to approval of September 20th, 2020 meetings. That was minutes that was in your packet. And I'll be looking for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion, corrections? Seeing none, looking to call the vote. Does staff do that? Do roll call voting?
Sergio, if you can just kind of monitor that to go around the table and ask each member to vote on it by name.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Bristol?
Aye.
Ms. Field? Ms. Quansman?
Aye.
Mr. Walling?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Evans?
Aye.
Ms. Simpson?
I'll abstain because I was absent from that meeting.
Okay. Ms. Martin? Ms. Robinson? Ms. Delahoy?
Aye.
Mr. DeCampo? Mr. Alcaraz?
As a new member, do I have the opportunity to vote on that or not? Since I wasn't
You can
there.
vote or abstain.
Well, I trust the judgment of my colleagues that everything was accurate, so I would support. Aye.
And I vote in favor. Great, thank you. The next item is appointment of committee officers. The chair had termed out, so I took over as vice chair for this meeting. So we'll be looking for nominations for a chair and a vice chair. Anyone want to make a nomination, just raise your hand.
Mr. Nelson, before we do that, we do have someone on the attendee side with the last name of Robinson. Can I ask them to let us know if they are indeed a committee member?
Yes.
Doug Robinson, are you our committee member?
Franny, this is Sergio. If it's Miss Marilyn Robinson, she is a committee member.
I know the name is listed as Doug Robinson. That's why I'm trying to confirm.
Gotcha.
Forgive me. Please proceed.
Okay,
Also,
thank you.
another point of clarification, Mr. Nelson, I believe we're supposed to take public comment on that agenda item. Should we
Okay.
for public comments? I could
So
go.
we're open for public comment on a appointment of committee members.
So let me read out that script for you. If you are a member of the public who has joined the Zoom call today to comment on agenda item number 1, I'm sorry, excuse me, agenda item number 2, you may now enter the queue using the raise hand function if you are logged in using a computer, or *9 if you're using your phone to call in. Once again, this is for agenda item number 2. Comments will be taken following the committee's presentation or any comments you might have.
Great. Thank you. So we are looking for nominations for chair and then a nomination for vice chair.
Mr. Chair, this is Legal Counsel Ruben Duran. It appears Mr. Hunter has raised his hand. You have the option to take public comment now or after the nominations, and just as long as it's before the vote. It's your choice.
We could take his comment now.
Okay.
Mr. Hunter, if you could unmute yourself and provide your comment, and I'm going to share the 3-minute screen in just a second. Give me.
Yes, hello there. Jason Hunter, Ward 1 here in the city of Riverside. Obviously a former member of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. I just wanted to talk about membership in general. It's very obvious to me as someone who's been a community activist for quite a long time in the city, ratepayer and taxpayer defender, that there's a problem with our bond program. And not so much as to get into the use of the Measure O funds, which I still believe was a bait and switch on the taxpayers. But secondly, that there's a lack of real independence on the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, and the fact that we have a process by which the staff members who run the programs in which the citizens are supposed to be overseeing the expenditures of bond money that everybody's paying out of their property taxes on their assessments, that the staff members are picking the oversight committee members. I think that is incredibly offensive. Anyone with half a brain, in my opinion, in any sense of ethics, understands what a huge conflict that is, that the overseen are picking the overseers. And in my opinion, it completely thwarts, and it is an end around of the protections that were supposed to be afforded folks under Prop 39, which is a Measure O was passed. A Prop 39 bond, of course, promised the voters 3 things in return for lowering the threshold on bonds from 66% to 55% for school facilities. And those 3 things were, number 1, a specific project list; number 2, annual financial and performance audits; and number 3, an independent Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. And we don't have that here in Riverside. And my guess is it's a problem statewide. In fact, it's not even my guess. I know it's a problem statewide. But we need to address that here. And the board seems very weak-kneed in addressing that issue. And the proof is now in the pudding. Of course, I made these complaints for, during my entire time that I was on that board. And now, the staff, with the implicit consent of a few board members, is my understanding, went out of its way to change its practices as to how it chose its committee members. It changes practice just as my term was ending in August of last year. And I find that to be, as you said, it's offensive. It's offensive not just to me, but I think it's going to be offensive as the greater community finds out what happened with these positions and how staff interfered with the process and got rid of one of the leading critics as to how the bond money has been used. I think it's wrong, quite frankly, and I think there will be accountability. And I really hope that members of the Bond Oversight Committee step up individually and help me change this process. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments?
We have no other raised hands right now from the public. Mr. Evans, I know I see your hands raised, but since you are part of the committee, you could participate in the conversation following the closing of public comments.
Seeing no other public comment, I'll call on Mr. Evans.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to nominate Keith Ellison as the chair and David Bristow as the vice chair.
Thank you.
I second that.
Thank you, Mr. Walling. Any other comments or nominations? Since it was motion and second is a single slate, we'll go ahead and vote on it that way. If there's any comments, if not, I'll call the vote. Mr. Bristol?
Aye.
Ms. Field? I don't think she's. Ms. Kwansman?
Aye.
Mr. Walling?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Evans?
Aye.
Ms. Simpson?
Aye.
Okay. Ms. Martin?
Aye.
Ms. Robinson, if that was the right one. Oh, Mr. Delahoy?
Aye.
Mr. DeCampo? And Mr. Alcaraz?
Aye.
Aye. Passes, and I vote yes, so it passes. Thank you all. So the next item we're moving to is a discussion item. We have, I believe, 5 new members today. And so staff is going to make a presentation on the new member resource orientation. And I'm not sure who from staff is making that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. I'll ask, is it Nick? If they can bring the on your screen, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee Members Handbook. All right, so thank you. This item is we're gonna tag team with myself and our legal counsel. But what I wanted to share with you, and this has been in the past a request from all committee members, and now having the 5 new members, I think this is a great little handbook, resource book that we can add to it later on, but it's more of a quick reference of things really what pertains to the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Next slide. Oh, yeah, there you go. So this is just a table of contents of what really this handbook contains. And the first section includes the list of the committee members. And in the past, they've asked the term, when does the term end? So you have the list of all 13 members, active members. The second section includes the bylaws of the committee. The third section includes the Measure O resolution, and this is the resolution that the board approved prior to passing Measure O. And this really contains the meat of what is Measure O and the project list of the program itself. The next section includes, it's titled Cash Flow Presentation, but really is a combination of data that was presented to the board at the May 19, 2020 board meeting as a snapshot of where we're at today in terms of Measure O projects. It contains the entire capital facilities program that Measure O is going to be used. And it also has some snapshot timelines and what would be completed with Measure O funds, local funds, which are developer fees, CFDs and so forth, and then state funding, which projects fall under the state funding reimbursements. So it's a good reference, and I'll go through it in a bit to kind of give you a good reference where we're at as an overall picture of the Measure O specific projects. The next section includes acronyms. Typically when we present or staff, project managers go over their projects, we often refer to CDE, DSA, and CEQA, and things like that, that for us is everyday terms, but I think this will be helpful for the committee as they become familiar with those acronyms. The next section includes contact information, how to reach staff in our support staff. And then the next section is web links, the Measure O web link, where we keep an update of all the projects that are in the planning phase, site phase, or construction phase. And then also there's a link there too of the dedicated Citizens Bond Oversight Committee web link that you can always go into. There's information not only on the upcoming meetings, but also past meetings and presentations and handouts. And a lot of this information is there too, like the resolutions, the bylaws, and other important information that this committee has been having oversight since 2017, when this committee was formed by our Board of Education. And just more in terms of the committee, the Board of Education appoints the committee, not staff. And so that's very important to know. And that's in the bylaws and in the resolutions. Next page, please. Next slide. Again, we went over this one. This is the list of all our active members. Next slide. And here, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask our legal counsel, David Katsnoka, to help us walk us through just the highlights of the bylaws. I think this is important, not only as a refresher for all the committee members, but specifically for our new members. Really, what are the bylaws and what do we mean by bylaws and being independent? And really, where do we, this committee, the purpose of the committee and how it was formed. So David, if you don't mind, can you unmute and then kind of walk us through, I'm not necessarily word by word, but just the highlights of really what's important for our new members and our existing members? Thank you.
Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yes, you're unmuted.
All right, thank you. My name is David Katsnoka. I'm a municipal bond attorney with the firm of Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Roth, and based in San Francisco. And I've been the bond attorney for the district for a number of years and was the author of Measure O and these bylaws. So it's been said correctly just a few minutes ago that Measure O was passed under the auspices of a provision of the California Constitution that allows bonds to be approved with 55% voter approval. The enactment of that amendment to Article 13A of the Constitution was accompanied by the addition of enabling legislation into the Education Code that was designed to set forth the powers and responsibilities of a citizen oversight committee. As was stated earlier, when the district passed Measure O, they had to satisfy certain conditions. One, that the tax for Measure O bonds would never exceed $60 per $100 of assessed valuation, that they would perform annual financial and performance audits, that provide a project list as part of the materials that were submitted to the voters, and they would create, populate, and empower an oversight committee with those responsibilities that were identified by the state legislature, enacted into the Education Code, and are reflected in these bylaws. So let's just start from a highlight point of view with the name of this committee: Riverside Unified School District Independent Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. So there are two words that are most important in the title. First is the word independent, which I think means two things. Number one, since members of the Oversight Committee are appointed by the Board of Education, vacancies are filled by the Board of Education, and the committee is a committee of the Board of Education. The first meaning of independent is that you have the opportunity to exercise the powers that are set forth in the bylaws and in the Education Code without interference from the governing board of the school district who appointed its members. The second meaning of independent is free of conflict of interest, which is why the law provides that no employees of the district or no vendors of the district can serve on the Bond Oversight Committee. Independent does not mean you write your own bylaws, you set your own scope of authority, because as a matter of statewide concern, all bond oversight committees are subject to the same rules and regulations, and they're all contained in the Education Code. And in the context of the Education Code, to me, that's what the word independent means. And secondly, the word oversight. There are many different kinds of committees that school district governing boards can create. Advisory committees. This is not an advisory committee. You're an oversight committee, and you like that fact because unlike advisory committees and unlike elected officials, oversight committees, not being decision makers per se, are not subject to filing the Form 700 conflict of interest statement under the Fair Political Practice Commission regulations. And so that's one of the advantages of being in oversight committee. I would draw your attention just quickly to section 2. Even though you're an oversight committee, not elected and not providing advice to elected officials, the committee is nonetheless subject to the Brown Act. The Brown Act's goal is to make sure that activities of the committee are conducted in a public forum under the bright blue skies and the sunshine of transparency. And while there could be a lot said about the Brown Act, I think from an oversight committee's perspective and for a new member's perspective, there's just a couple of points worth summarizing. Number one, Brown Act committees can only discuss topics that are on the agenda. So if you have a topic that you would like to discuss at the meeting, you have to make sure that you get that information and that request for a discussion item to either the district staff or the chair, and ask that it be placed on the agenda. You cannot save a big idea for discussion and bring it to the meeting and expect it to be discussed, because the Brown Act frustrates that level of spontaneity. The second thing is that the Brown Act prohibits what are called serial meetings. So as it relates to topics that are relevant to the business of the committee, individual members of the committee cannot have serial or one conversation, one email with a member to another member, then to a third member, then to a fourth member. Those are serial meetings, regardless of whether or not they're face-to-face, telephonic, or electronic. So all of the business of the committee should be done in open session at a properly noticed meeting where the public can be present. While the Brown Act allows the Board of Education to go into closed session to discuss litigation and property acquisition and personnel matters, I've never seen an oversight committee yet have to face either one of those exceptions to the Brown Act. So the presumption should be all of your business will be conducted in public. And then lastly, turning to section 3 of the bylaws. This is the nub of the three-legged stool that reflects your statutory responsibilities. And I'll start with section 3.2. The committee shall review expenditure reports produced by the district to ensure that bond proceeds were expended only for the purposes set forth in Measure O. So under the California Constitution, Prop 39 bond monies have to be spent for the improvement, construction, repair, furnishing, and equipping of school facilities, and not for teacher or administrator salaries or other operating expenses. And to the degree that a specific ballot measure narrows that scope of authority, well, then the narrower ballot question controls the expenditure of bond funds. So in the binder that Sergio referred you to that was attached to your agenda, there is a copy of the resolution that called for the election. And in your spare time, you can look at that resolution and focus particularly on Exhibit B to that resolution, because that resolution contains each of the 3 component parts of Measure O. projects that are authorized by Measure O are the sum total of the projects authorized by the 75-word ballot question, which includes the magical words to construct, acquire, repair classroom sites, facilities, and equipment. So the first question you ask in reviewing expenditures on projects, is this a project that constitutes the construction, acquisition, repair of classroom sites, facilities, and equipment, yes or no? The second source of Measure O legal authority is found in the incorporated by reference Facilities Master Plan approved by the board February 1, 2016. Whatever is in that document as of that date is an authorized Measure O project. The Facility Master Plan, however, is not Measure O. Measure O's authorization of projects also includes the project list that is Exhibit B to the resolution that I just referenced. And when you look at that resolution, you'll see several pages of descriptions of projects, some specific, some pretty general, some in bold, some in a long run-on sentence, some bullet pointed, some not. The format of the resolution doesn't make any difference to the legal authority. The legal authority to spend money, to spend Measure O monies under the cases that have interpreted the law in this regard is that the district is authorized to spend Measure O bond monies on the types of projects that are described in the project list in the resolution that's in your handbook. So as you evaluate projects, you have to ask yourself, does this project represent the construction, repair, acquisition of classroom sites, facilities, and equipment? Or is it the type of project that's described in Exhibit B to the resolution? If you answer that question, yes, then you have an authorized project. And then your next duty, once having made that determination, that you would review an expenditure report to determine that the bond monies for that project were spent on that project and not used for teacher or administrative salaries or other operating expenses. And looking then at what constitutes administrative salaries, there is in the bylaws in section 3.2 a reference to this Attorney General opinion 041110. When Proposition 39 was passed, many lawyers in the bond world took the view that for the law to mean something, the prohibition against using bond monies to pay administrative salaries probably meant that salaries of district employees were not authorized to be paid for with bonds. And so 4 years after Prop 39 passed, a school district asked the Attorney General for a legal opinion as to what the prohibition on the payment of administrative salaries meant. And the Attorney General said, if a school district employee meets the but-for test, then that person is not an administrator, and that person's salary and overhead can be paid for with bond proceeds to the extent that that employee's time is applied towards a project being funded with Measure O dollars. So, but for Measure O, a designated employee would not be performing the services in connection with a project had there not been Measure O. So, whether it's Sergio or a few percentage of time of the chief business officer or a staff accountant or an internal architect, any district employee who meets this but-for test can have at the district's election their salary and overhead paid from Measure O bond proceeds. So when you get an expenditure report, you're not only asking yourself, is this a project authorized by Measure O, yes or no? Are the expenditures involving the payment of any salaries of district employees, yes or no? And then you ask the question, of the staff to demonstrate how the payment of those salaries meets the Attorney General's but-for test. You can ask questions about how did the district track that employee's time to make sure that it was fairly allocated between a bond project and other responsibilities at the district. In the context of describing or evaluating projects, while not part of your formal statutory obligations, the committee is authorized to consider and review efforts that are made by the district to maximize bond proceeds by implementing various cost-saving measures. So that as a project report is given to you, if I were on the committee, I might ask questions regarding, did you competitively bid the professional services contract? Did you bid the construction contract? Did you design the project to help you qualify for state matching funds? Did you design the project to reduce your ongoing operating expenses? What did you do to stretch the bond dollars? Because Proposition 39 has an anti-waste element to it. And part of the job of the Oversight Committee is to try to form an opinion as to whether or not bond monies have been efficiently spent, not just spent on legally authorized projects. So while you can't conclude as a matter of law that the district's failure to take efficiency steps that you would have thought would be appropriate, that doesn't result in there being a violation of the law. The only violation of the law would be if they spent money on projects that were not authorized by the scope of Measure O as I've described it. The Oversight Committee can form opinions about waste. Another example of what you might discuss with staff is, have there been change orders on a particular project? You don't have the right to ask for copies of every single change order, but you have the right to know whether or not a project has been experiencing change orders, and you have the right to know the causes behind the level of change orders, and you have the right to ask whether or not change orders are more than anticipated, higher than, lower than standard for that type of project, and form conclusions yourself about how well the bond program is being managed. And to the degree that on a cumulative basis you find that there's a lot of these little areas where efficiencies are not being attended to or waste is occurring, then the committee can choose to communicate to staff or to communicate to the governing board of the school district your concerns in that area. But it doesn't result in there being an illegal use of funds. There have been lawsuits in which taxpayers have sued school districts for violating the anti-waste provisions. And if a member of the Oversight Committee believed that bond money was being inappropriately used, inappropriate means illegally used, for a non-authorized Measure O project, they could sue the district. The committee could not. The committee doesn't have a remedy. But an individual taxpayer under the Education Code is given the remedy of seeking a judicial determination about the authorization to use bond funds. If you have questions as to whether or not a project is authorized by Measure O, the preferred sequence is to ask the staff to explain it to you, or to ask the staff to obtain a legal opinion from me or someone else as to whether or not a certain project is or is not within the scope of legal authority for Measure O, and factor those conclusions in. In reviewing expenditures, if the committee believes that they're not getting all the information that they need, they obviously have the right to request additional information. If additional information is not forthcoming and the committee gets frustrated about that, you can always go to the superintendent and ask for assistance. Or if the superintendent isn't able to help you, you always could go to a public meeting at the Board of Education and ask for additional support associated with your review of expenditures. So that's your primary function. You have two, though, secondary functions that are part of your legal obligations and responsibilities. Number one is to inform the public of what you're doing and what you're concluding. So as you can see from 3.1, the committee shall inform the public concerning the district's expenditure of bond proceeds. That's what the education code says. And then I've added these additional two sentences editorially. In fulfilling this duty, all official communications to the board or public shall come from the chair, and the chair shall only release information that reflects the majority view of the committee. And I did that because there were a lot of cases in which members of oversight committees were showing up at other public meetings and self-identifying as a member of the committee and not distinguishing between their free speech rights and speaking on behalf of the committee, which is why it's just better local government to have one person speak on behalf of the committee, but only share the majority opinion of the committee. So the law doesn't tell you how to inform the public. The law obligates the district to maintain this website link for you. New members ought to review the link for Measure O, because that vehicle is one way in which you inform the public. If you think more information needs to be on the website, the content of the website should be an agenda item on a future agenda, and suggestions could be made about what else should be included on the website to better inform the public. You can decide yourself what other steps you want to take to inform the public. It could be requesting a column or a newsletter, which is part of a larger district-wide circular. You could stand up at a public meeting of the Board of Education and provide information in public comment about your activities. It's really for you to decide what you think is best for your community. The duty to inform is good news and bad news. The law doesn't say you only inform the public as to good things. Staff obviously has an incentive to provide you with what you need so that your communications reflect the hard work and the good work that they think they're doing. But if there is bad news and you've vetted the bad news up the food chain to the superintendent and to the board, and after vetting what you think of as bad news through the process, you believe that it's unresolved bad news, well, you have a legal duty to inform the public in the same way that you would inform the public of your positive conclusions about the implementation of Measure O. Section 3.3 is your third duty, which is to prepare an annual report in which you conclude that the bond monies during the accounting period have all been spent for the construction, renovation, repair, furnishing, equipping of school facilities, and not for teacher salaries, administrator salaries, or other operating expenses. So since 2017, the committee has been preparing annual reports. If I were a new member, I'd look at the annual reports as they are listed on the website. You may like them, you may not like them. If you don't like their format, it's a document that's approved by the committee. I think in the past, the initial draft has been assembled by district staff and then given to the committee for editing and modification. But if you're a new member and you just don't like the look of it, if I were in your chair feeling that way, I'd either go on the website of other districts in the area and look at their oversight committee annual reports, or ask the staff to provide you with samples of other districts' reports. And you can factor that into the committee's conversation about what the new committee would like their annual report to look like going forward. It's a
Mr.
document.
Castano, can I interrupt you just for 1 second to make a clarification? And those reports were prepared by the chair and vice chair and staff. and then present it to the committee. So I want to clarify that it wasn't something staff gave us. We met with staff as chair and vice chair and prepared those reports.
Thank you for that clarification. Nonetheless, new members have the right to chime in and provide opinions to the chair and vice chair on a going forward basis if you know of illustrations of an annual report from another district that look good, that look like they get the job done. I guess my point is, it's a committee responsibility. The committee votes on it and then presents the annual report to the school board. I think that from Sergio, from a summary point of view, those are the most important features. And if there are questions on that or other elements of the bylaws, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, David. Is it Nick? Can we go to slide 22 or page 22? All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, I don't know if you can maybe present it as a, enlarge it a little bit, but this one I wanted to just share just very quickly. We're not going to go through everything, but this was the presentation that was presented to the board back again in May, as I mentioned. And this was a snapshot overview of the entire Measure program. Okay, that's fine. So this is good. Just stay on. All right. All right, thank you. Stay on that slide for a minute. So this is an overall picture of everything, projects from A through H, and then below that, other projects. There's the STEM Center project, the neighborhood schools. This list of projects was established back in October 2017 by the Board of Education during several workshops and study sessions regarding prioritization of projects. So this is what the board came up with, and again, this was a snapshot as an update to the board back in May. And what this gives you is the list of all the projects. A through H are existing schools, and then the other projects, which again, those are new construction and so forth. Next slide.
Sergio, can I just make a comment about this slide, if you don't mind?
Sure, go ahead.
It's really not, it's just for the members' information that when the school district issues bonds, and you can see on this slide, first series of bonds, 100 million, bond series 2, 172 million. They have a obligation to spend 85% of that money in 3 years. So bonds are sold for basically 3 years worth of construction projects at a time. And so that's why it's important that projects move along. And that's why I think there's a division here that looks like it's in 3-year blocks. That's largely driven by the legal requirements associated with issuing bonds.
That is a great point. Thank you, David. Next slide. And so this is just more of a description of what we talked about. So next slide. All right, here in this section, it covers what is the yellow, blue, pink, and so forth. And just very quickly, the yellow area sections are the planning phase of a project. The blue section, the blue colors are the construction phase of the project. And you have just some bullets of what that contains. And then the pink color or salmon color is the siting site phase of a project. Next slide. Now on this section here, the red slash on the right hand says projects contingent on state funding reimbursements. In this section, you can see that, and I can't see the date on top, but these are any projects that fall within that section are projects that are going to that are contingent on state funding. Now, projects above that, you know, A's, B's, and C's, and D's, and so forth, and even all the way to E, those projects with the funds on hand, Measure O, developer fees, CFDs, local funds, will be able to complete from start to finish all the way to construction. But as they get shovel ready, we're, as a district, we're submitting for state funding, getting in line for state funding. Now, the state may not have money today, but we're in line for any future state bond passages. As soon as we get those monies and get reimbursed, that's where that section in red, the projects in groups F, G, and H, those funds will then pay for those projects to continue in the planning and construction. So that really what that section means. Next slide. And this is just more of a zooming into projects A through E. And again, you can see that projects A and all the way through E will be funded through Measure O and local funds. Next slide. And then this is the next portion of the projects that are contingent on state funding. Next slide. And now these are the projects under other projects or extended projects. We have here, for example, the STEM project at UCR. The board on this meeting, they had gave staff direction to continue with this project in terms of the site phase or the due diligence phase, but not going to construction until state funding is reimbursed. So kind of that's why you see only the pink area. So with funds that we have on hand, we'll continue with this project with only all the way through the siting phase. And then School 1, School 2, those are the Casablanca and the Spring Mountain Ranch projects. Those, you can see that there's a pink phase, which is completed. We already purchased those lands. We're in the planning phase, the yellow phase, and then we'll move into the construction, the blue section. And the construction falls within bond series 3 and 4. Starting after 2023, those funds would become available. School neighborhood number 3, that is really more the east side neighborhood. That project, and we'll talk a little bit more on the extent of that project, but that right now is all pink because there's 20 plus properties that we're buying in order to put a school there in the future. So that's the due diligence, CEQA process, the planning, engineering of the site phase, not necessarily going into designing or planning the yellow phase. So that would happen as soon as we get state reimbursement. The next slide. And here in summary, because we get asked all the time, so what are we going to accomplish? What are we going to be able to finish with Measure O funds and local funds? And again, this was a snapshot back in May. You can see that with funds, with Measure O funds, CFDs, developer fees, grants, local funds, we will be able to complete the construction, all the way to the construction phase of groups A through E, complete the neighborhood school 1 and 2, which is Casablanca and Spring Mountain Ranch. The next section is we'll be able to complete the site acquisition phase of the neighborhood school number 3 and the STEM center, and then shovel-ready phases of King High School modernization and Ramona High School modernization. And that's all the way through the engineering, getting us in line for state funding. Now, when the state passes our bond, and right now we're eligible for about close to $200 million as we complete projects again in groups A through E, we're submitting, getting in line for state funding. When that money comes in, then we'll be able to complete projects in groups F through H, complete the neighborhood school number 3, which is the East Side School, move into construction for the STEM center. And then you have here a note that the state could put in the ballot a state bond initiative in 2022, 2024, 2026, 2028, 2032. So there's all these opportunities for us. And that's why it is important for us maximizing our dollars, moving quickly, getting shovel-ready projects to get in line for state funding, so that when the state passes a bond, we're in line and we're the first districts to receive those fundings, those reimbursements that we are eligible for. And one of the great things about Measure O is when Measure O was passed, we were then eligible for state funding. And again, we're one of the few districts that have eligibility for state funding, modernization, new construction, and it's close, right, you know, as it's close to $200 million at this time. Next slide. And I think that's it. So I just wanted to go over that fairly quickly. You have this handbook on hand. We're not going to go through it. I think that's the end of that. It's a resource book for you to have as a handy reference. And at all times, at any time, you can always ask staff for questions and clarifications. But we thought that this would be a good handbook for you to have. And as we move forward with and continue with Measure O, remember Measure O is a 10 to 15 year program. It's not a 2-year program. You know, just a reminder, Measure B was a 15-year program. Measure O is the same thing. As you saw on that worksheet, you know, it takes us all the way to 2032 to complete all the projects. So we're here for a long time. This committee is very important for this measure. And again, as we continue with this Measure O, we can add more things to this handbook. And with that, back to Mr. Nelson. And
all right, as any committee members have any questions based on that presentation?
I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting. This is Gabby. Before we go to committee member comment, we need to take public comment. So I'm going to read the prompt for the public. And I'm going to just share my timer screen. If you're a member of the public who has joined the Zoom call today to comment on agenda item number 1 under discussion items, you may now enter the queue by using the raise hand function if you are logged in using a computer, or *9 if you're using your phone to call in. So I know we have Mr. Hunter who's raised his hand. So Mr. Hunter, if you could unmute yourself, I'll go ahead and start the clock for you. Is Mr. Hunter unmuted?
I'm unmuted now, but you know, in the future, I can't really unmute myself. You have to unmute me. I don't have that option.
Okay.
So once again, good evening, Jason Hunter. New member orientation was a topic I remember bringing up, perhaps even in my first meeting on the Bond Oversight Committee back in 2018. I think it's something that was desperately needed at the time. I'm glad to see it addressed, but my question is this. Why is the district, the staff, the group that you're supposed to be overseeing, producing your orientation? Where was the input from the committee itself? I know that the former chair of the committee, George Fromm, was working on this, and actually I was on his committee to start putting together some orientation materials when I was intentionally removed from the committee by allowing my term to end by district staff, which includes Mr. San Martin, and I imagine Mr. Casnocha as well, although I can't really prove that. I think the committee has to take a more active role in its own orientation, or you're going to get a biased view on what your duties and powers are. I mean, for example, and I think it continues to be completely inappropriate that Mr. Casnocha continues to act as if he's the Bond Oversight Committee's lawyer when he's clearly not. He's the district's lawyer, the entity that you're charged by state law with overseeing. Let me read from the American Bar Association concerning transactions with persons other than clients. It says, dealing on behalf of a client, in this case, with a person who is not represented by counsel, a lawyer shall not state or imply that the lawyer is disinterested. When the lawyer knows or reasonably should know that the unrepresented person, and this is the CBOC, misunderstands the lawyer's role in the matter, the lawyer shall make reasonable efforts to correct the misunderstanding. The lawyer shall not give legal advice to an unrepresented person other than the advice to secure counsel if the lawyer knows or reasonably should know that the interests of such a person are or have a reasonable possibility of being in conflict of interest with the interests of the client. And so, in my opinion, Mr. Casnocha is violating the spirit of that rule with the American Bar Association. I'm sure there's something in the California Bar Rules of Professional Conduct as well, in which he kind of tries to present himself as your attorney, which is why I think that this body needs its own independent counsel, as has been suggested in best practices by the California Association of Bond Oversight Committees, in order to make your own independent decisions. I think you guys are being led, quite frankly, by interested parties in the outcomes of the decisions you make, and that doesn't give a lot of confidence to the general public, and it needs to be fixed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Mr. Dawson, would you like to provide your comment, please? Let me go ahead and restart that clock. I think you are allowed to talk now, Mr. Dawson.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We could hear you. I'll go ahead.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you. My name's Kevin Dawson. I live over by UCR. I'm a parent and taxpayer. I've been reviewing the exact language out of Prop 39 by which the Measure O funds were obtained. And it says that, you know, this 55% vote requirement would apply only if the local bond measure presented to the voter includes a specific list of school projects to be funded and certified that the school board has evaluated the safety, class size reduction, and information technology needs in developing that list. And the district has a list, but they pulled a sleight of hand. In that list, there was not a single brand new school on the list that was presented to voters. And what the school district did was, after the bond measure passed, they added a supplemental list that included 4 brand new schools: the STEM school, Casablanca, Eastside, and Spring Valley Ranch. And they made the STEM school the #1 priority for the district. And in fact, at a workshop meeting, school board member Levy stated to the group, hey, since we're making this our #1 priority and we don't have enough money to build it, we need to be willing to look down the list and take money from the other needy projects. I know they're needy because I've looked. That's outrageous. And you, as a committee, it says here, the committee must ensure that the bond funds are properly spent as proposed on the ballot and that none are spent on other district projects. The committee can appeal to a judge to stop the expenditures and halt the construction of projects the committee believes the funds are being improperly spent. Those 4 brand new schools are improper expenditure of Measure O money. They violate Prop 39, and I want the committee to fulfill your obligation to discuss and make a finding on these, and if necessary, go to a judge and ask that these projects be removed. I know that sounds radical. I'm not a radical person, but I don't like bond abuse of taxpayers, and that's what the school board did, and that's what the staff here did. The previous CFO, when I asked her, why did you agree to build an elementary school for Spring Valley Ranch? The developer should be funding that. She goes, if we didn't agree to do it, he might have taken his project elsewhere and the region would have lost out on the economic benefit of that project. Well, that's bullshit, because developers don't take their housing projects someplace else. It's not a 7-Eleven. This is bond fraud, in my opinion, or something. It has something to do with bond fraud, and you are supposed to be citizen oversight, and you need to look at this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Any other comments? Having none, I think that concludes public comment for this agenda item.
Great. Thank you all. I remember on public comment, we can not address those at this meeting because they're not agendized. But if any member feels like they want to address that in the future, under committee member comments, they'll be able to add that as a future agenda item. So we cannot directly address those public comments, but we do appreciate the public commenting. Anyone have any questions on the presentation specifically? I do have a question for Mr. San Martin, and maybe it'll be addressed in the Measure O update. I was just curious as to the cost effects of COVID on whether or not how it's affected the projects. I don't know if that was appropriate in your last presentation or will be in the Measure O project updates when they talk about the cost of each school.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. If you're asking specifically how COVID has impacted the bids on construction projects, is that correct?
Kind of. There was some talk at the last meeting, which has been a while, that the school district was able to push some project forward because the schools weren't being occupied, and to get some construction done on a faster scale. And I was wondering if that's had a positive effect on the budget.
Yes, definitely. Early on, when the governor mandated the stay-home mandate, one of the essential workers are school construction work, and we were able to remain in construction. And one of the things in construction is when you have a vacant campus, construction flows much quicker and much faster and so forth, so to answer your question, yes, there's been some positives when having schools in construction moving into phases much quicker than navigating within a school that's operating when you have students and staff in the public. It's much difficult. But we are on several projects, and the project managers will go into more detail on schedules. And you can see then that there's been several projects that we've been able to accelerate. In terms of bidding, there's been ups and downs. Part of it's either pre-COVID or within COVID that the cost of construction has been impacted. In some cases, we've getting some good numbers. In some cases, it's been more costly, but talk a little bit more when we get into the updates on the projects.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is there any other questions on that issue? Ms. Martin?
Thank you. I'll just ask the group, because I asked Keith in chat, and I figured an effort of transparency, I would ask all of you. I just asked if they're in the report, if there were enrollment trends and enrollment projections to support the idea to construct new schools, because I think that would be interesting to look at, especially going forward. You know, I hear talk that enrollment might be declining a bit, and I think that would be good information to have. And I asked Keith that question, and he said, no, it doesn't contain that information right now, but we can look at adding it. And is that something that we can get?
And I can touch it when we go through the project updates, when we get to the neighborhood schools. I can touch on that a little bit, and that may help.
Yeah, and I was answering specifically whether or not that was in the annual report, and that's something that this committee does not report on, but if it's something we want to look on reporting on in the future, we can definitely discuss that as a committee. But we did not include enrollment numbers or trends in the annual report to the district. To the Board of Education, I should say. This is more appropriate. Okay, now we're ready for the Measure O project update, which will be presented by individual staff members, project managers on each project.
Great.
And by the way, it did come in your packet as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Gabby, do you need to open up the queue or wait till the presentation is done?
I'll go ahead and open up the queue right now, and then we'll wait till after the presentation to take the comments. So if you are a member of the public who has joined the Zoom call today to comment on agenda item number 2 on discussion items, you may now enter the queue by using the raise hand function if you are logged in using the computer, or *9 if you're using your phone to call in. Once again, this is for agenda item number 2 under discussion items. And we'll take your comments after the presentation.
Thank you, Gabby. This presentation, and if Nick, if you can bring up the slides, please. This will be also a tag team. I'll kick it off, and then I'll ask members of staff and project managers to jump in and give us an update on their project. And then we'll also ask our Ms. Tarana with the consultant who's financial reporting. So let's go into the next slide. And Tarana, do you want to jump in and kind of walk us through this slide?
Yes, I'll be happy to. Good evening, and very nice to meet all the new members. My name is Tarana Alam. I'm with Key Analytics. We're an independent firm that basically take the district's financial data that's already in their financial reports in the funds that are on deposit with the Riverside County treasurer, and we put them in a format that are easy to understand and follow, and so that you could review the expenditures of Measure easily. In addition to that, it's double check of that system, and so that all of the checks and balances that are in place from Prop 39 and under Measure O, all those requirements are met. In addition to us, obviously, you get the performance and financial audits from the independent auditors that confirm the same numbers. So we're all on the same page and we all have the same exact information. And you're getting this data from an independent outside source that is presenting you this financial information. So on page 1 is a broad summary of Measure O. As you can see, there so far 2 bond series have been issued to date. Series A was for 100 million and it was issued in 2017. Series B was for 172 million on the pie chart on the left, and that was issued in 2019. While these funds are sitting there in the county treasurer, they earn a little bit of interest based on what the county treasurer invests these funds in. And to date, the bar chart on the right, as you can see, the funds have generated $6.7 million in interest. So overall, to date, Measure O has generated 276,211, of which 181 million has been encumbered. Encumbered means commitments, contracts, purchase orders have been issued, and all of those documents go through the board approval process and through the district's internal checks and balances. So there are criteria for doing bidding, and all the warrants go for approval to the board. So there are lots of different checks and balances that internally happen before we reconcile and update this information and present them to you. The 94 million that's currently remaining in cash is already allocated to projects, but some of those projects have not been bid yet, and so they will also be committed in the bar chart. The bottom of the bar chart, the red is going to be keep going up, and the blue part is going to be going down as more and more projects come online and funds are encumbered. Do you guys have any questions about this page? Okay. Sergio, did you want me to go through the rest of the financials or after the project status update?
After the project status. Thank you, Tarana. Next slide, please.
No problem. Sure.
All right, next slide. Okay, before I asked our project manager on Harrison to jump in and give us an update, I wanted to also just to kind of set the tone here that, we're very excited. As you know, as I mentioned earlier, the projects from A through H, we are now in construction on projects A, B, and C, various projects, about 11 projects that have been, actually there's 16 projects in groups A, B, and C. And out of those 16, we moved into, fairly quickly moving into construction on 11 of those projects that you will see now. What's the status on those? But we're also happy to report that we're currently bidding 3 more projects, existing projects, so that they can start construction as soon as this spring and summer. So we're very excited that we are moving quickly, very diligently on this on our capital facilities program. And what's important here is that on these projects in groups A, B, and C, we have also submitted for state funding. We are in line for over $67 million of state reimbursements. So that is very important as we move quickly on shovel ready to getting these projects shovel ready. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that is very important for a district to maximize our dollars and to get in line for state funding. So with that, I believe Harrison is Nadia. Can you jump on, Nadia, and give us an update where we're at with Harrison? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sergio. Hi, everyone. My name is Nadia, and I'm the project manager for the Harrison Elementary School. So as far as status on this project, the school project, all the building work has been completed. The only remaining work on site includes the installation of new landscape booster pump, landscape and irrigation in front of the renovated administration building and the new classroom building, and ADA upgrade work throughout the site. And this work is scheduled to be completed by the end of February. For some of those that have just joined the committee, a quick synopsis of what this project entailed. It was a new single-story 5-classroom building, a new parking lot and special education student pickup and drop off, the renovation of 3 existing kindergarten rooms into 2 kindergarten rooms to make them CDE compliant. The renovation included new finishes and infrastructure upgrades, including HVAC, fire alarm, PA clock and speaker, data and security. There were also improvements to the kinder playground area, including new hardscape, landscape and irrigation with shade trees and new synthetic turf. The complete renovation and reconfiguration of the existing administration building, including also HVAC, fire alarm, and low voltage upgrades. The exterior of the admin was also received new facade with new aluminum composite panels, new storefront glass, and new signage. We also relocated 5 portables for interim housing, and we removed 4 portables from the site as well. So just a quick overview of what that project started last year, and we are 99% complete with that. Next slide, and we can go over some of the photos. So what you see here on the left-hand side, that's the renovated facade of the administration. So the silver composite panels, that's all new facade. The glass is all brand new. The concrete hardscape with the ramp for ADA and the stairs, that's also new. As you can see too, there is dirt in front. So that's the landscape area I was speaking to that is receiving new landscape and irrigation. On the right-hand side, you have a snapshot also of the renovated admin building, which this includes the new health office. It received new ceiling, painting, flooring, all new, brand new casework as well. Next slide, please. As you can see here too on the left-hand side, a renovated staff lounge with 2 brand new restrooms with built-in casework, a view from either end. And they have already moved in, they have their printer set up. So these buildings have been occupied. Next slide, please. And this is just a site plan. As you can see, this is the old site plan. So this is not the new site plan. So towards the back of the campus, you'll see 5 portables. Sorry that I am unable to point them out on the screen, but those were relocated to the east side of the campus. Thank you. And that is actually where the new classroom building is currently now. Next slide, please. And this is a good representation of what was just shown too. So the yellow on the left-hand side where the portables were. So that is the new classroom building. And right in front of it is the new parking lot, as well as special education pickup and drop-off area. Thank you. Next slide, please. And that is a rendering of the facade of the new 5-classroom building. Next slide, please. And that is it for Harrison, unless there's questions.
Thank you, Nadia. Eric, you want to jump on Jefferson? Where are we with Jefferson?
Hi, Eric. I'm Eric, PM with Riverside Unified. I ran the Jefferson project out there. We also did a new elementary or kinder building with 6 new classrooms. Each classroom has their own restrooms in it for ease of access in the students. They got new playground equipment, new synthetic turf, new play equipment, and concrete tracks for them to ride their bicycles, tricycles around. And then also the existing site got upgraded with new AC units, new clock, speaker, data, fire alarm, and underground utilities. We replaced the complete gas line system underground because it was old and faulty. And then we also remodeled new ceilings and upgrades, interior upgrades throughout the whole site in the classrooms. throughout the complete site in every classroom that we touched. And NPR got completely remodeled, new AC system, new ductwork, and did the kitchen AC system. And then also the administration area got upgraded with the staff workroom, their lounges, and the administration ceiling being replaced. Next slide, please. This is a view on the left of the new kinder playground with the playground equipment, and kind of a slight view to the right of the classroom. On the right, the picture there was just some touch-up painting towards the end where we were cleaning up and doing punch list items on the existing buildings. Next slide, please. To the right, you see some new sod. That's actually real sod that was installed in the play areas outside the kinder area. And to the left is just showing where the existing trailers and construction site was when we were getting everything moved out and ready to clean up to get the grass back in for the students. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the existing site prior to construction. Kind of on the top middle where the asphalt is, to the left of that in the grass areas where the new kinder is. It probably will show in the next slide, please. So the yellow area is the new kinder building, and then all the other buildings throughout in red and brown were remodeled. In the pink, we removed 6 portables there, and the 3 above by the yellow were moved over to the other side behind the 3 orange portables up towards the asphalt play area. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the new playground area with the equipment and the building in the background, and the synthetic turf in the middle. Any questions on Jefferson?
Can you tell me what NPR stands for?
Multi-purpose room. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. NPR. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Go ahead on Madison.
All right, Madison Elementary School is under construction now. Sorry that I didn't mention either. Also, Jefferson is finished up. We are just working on closeout now. Madison Elementary is under construction. It's a new 5 classroom kinder wing, new synthetic grass areas, new passive travel. They got new play equipment for the lower and upper grades. And we are doing complete remodel on the existing classroom buildings, fire alarm, data, IP speakers, clocks, and then the multi-purpose room and admin on that job are getting completely remodeled. Right now, the existing or the new kinder wing is completed and occupied by staff, and the NPR and admin wing are under construction at this point to be turned over into February, early March. Next slide, please. These are some renderings to the left of, actually that's an actual picture of the office where you can see the insulation in the background before we're putting up our lath and plaster for the stucco. Picture to the right is one of the new AC units getting craned onto the building. And then the bottom picture in the middle is the actual kinder sidewalk on the new building with their fiber and planting areas and the fencing to keep the kids separated from the lower level kinder and upper grades. Next slide. This is an existing overview of the site before construction. Next slide, please. And this is a overview of the new wing, which is the kind of purplish area there in the middle. And to the south of that, just down to the left a little bit, the whole parking lot got redone with new bus drop-offs. Enters off of Madison Street, comes in, turns around by the new site, and then goes out and exits by the admin area, and then out back to Madison again. And that very congested school there, so this is a very big upgrade for them and make it ease of traffic. I don't know if anybody's ever been to that school, but it is a nightmare in the mornings and afternoons when parents come in, pick up, drop off. So this is going to alleviate a lot of that traffic. Next slide, please. And this is just a rendering of the kinder wing from a different view. Next slide, please. That was it. Any questions on Madison? Looks like you're up, Nadia.
Thank you, Eric. So next on the list is Jackson Elementary School. We have several phases under construction at once at that site currently. We'll start with the construction of the new 2-story 10 classroom building. So as far as progress on that, all the steel has been received on the site and the structural steel is underway. It's been erected on the site. We are currently working on the footings, the concrete footings around the building, installing the reinforcing for it, and the concrete and forming of the stem walls as well for that new building. We are also working on the parking lot that is being added. It's a staff parking lot, and that has been graded, asphalt has been poured, and a lot of the concrete also has been poured in that area. We are currently working on completing the retention basin that is part of that parking area as well. As far as modernization, since we last met, we actually have turned over 2 of the existing classroom buildings on that campus were turned over back in November and occupied by teachers and students. Currently, we're working on 2 additional permanent classroom buildings, renovating those. Those are receiving brand new carpet, paint in the classrooms, as well as new ceiling, new roofing, and new HVAC systems and PA clock and speaker. Those are currently going to actually be turned over next week. So those 2 buildings are near completion as well. And we are scheduled to start the next 2 permanent classroom buildings on that site on February 8th. Next slide, please. So on the top left-hand side, that is a picture of the new 2-story building where the steel has been erected. The bottom picture is also another angle of the building being currently erected. And on the right-hand side, you can see we're also painting the exterior of the school, and we're doing it with the phases of each building modernization. So that's just an example of one of the buildings. The painting has been complete. Next slide, please. On the left-hand side, you'll see the asphalt has been poured and the concrete curbs for the new parking lot area that I spoke of. The rebar installation photo, that is for the brand new building as well. Like I spoke, they're installing the reinforcing steel for the footings. And on the right-hand side, that's another one of the buildings that just received a new coat of paint. Next slide, please. Here's an existing site plan of the Jackson project. If you look at the top left-hand corner, there's a cluster of portables at the top, and that is where the brand new building is being constructed. Next slide, please. And here you can see it's angled differently, but the yellow area is where the brand new 2-story building is. And the purple area at the top is the new parking lot and drop-off area that you saw as well. And as I mentioned before, all the existing buildings on the campus, the classroom buildings, are being renovated, and we're essentially doing 2 buildings at a time. Next slide, please. What you see here is a rendering of the brand new 2-story building. Next slide, please. And that is it for Jackson. Any questions? No questions. Okay, I will move on to Magnolia Elementary School. So Magnolia Elementary School is well underway. We are currently working on the construction of 2 new single-story classroom buildings, 5 classrooms each for a total of 10 new classrooms. The 2 new buildings have been framed, plastered, and were just recently painted this week. The windows have been installed. The restrooms in one of the new buildings are underway, and the wall tiles have been installed in those restrooms. All the mechanical, plumbing, and electrical rough-in has been completed, and the drywall in the interior of the building has started. The ceiling grid in the building is also currently, and both buildings are currently being installed, along with the light fixtures in all the classrooms. Next slide, please. So on the top left-hand corner, those are the two new buildings. So they're very close to one another. They're facing each other. In between, there'll be hardscape new concrete with some seat walls and shade trees. On the right-hand side, you can see the building that's currently being plastered. You can see the scaffolding being installed. On the left-hand corner at the bottom, the current status is the roofing has been installed and the mechanical units also have been placed. And as you can see on the interior on the bottom photo too, drywall installation has begun. Next slide, please. Below is an existing site plan of Magnolia Elementary School. And just like in most of our situations at the bottom where you see the 4 portables, that's actually where the new 2 buildings are being constructed. Next slide, please. And that's what you see here on this slide. The yellow area is where the new building is being constructed. So originally back prior to bidding, it was going to be 1 building, but we were able to actually construct 2 new buildings with 5 classrooms each in order to remove 10 portables from that site. And it was very cost effective to do both of those buildings simultaneously. Next slide, please. And there is a rendering of the what will be the finished product. Like I mentioned, there'll be hardscape in between with seat walls and shade trees in between both buildings. Next slide, please. And that is the update on Magnolia. Any questions? All right. I will hop right into Adams Elementary School. So Adams Elementary School is the construction of a new single-story 5-classroom kindergarten building that will also have a kindergarten playground area. The framing for the new single-story building is complete. The installation of the air barrier around the building is underway, and lath and plaster is scheduled within the next few weeks. The Solitube skylights are in the process of being installed. The canopy steel for the overhangs on the project is complete. Rough-ins for mechanical, plumbing, and electrical are complete, and the duct work for the HVAC and the is currently being installed. Next slide, please. So as you can see on the left-hand side, all the framing for the project, the wood framing has been complete. On the right-hand side, there's also a new parking lot and area in front of the new building as well. And so that is also underway, and the asphalt for that area has been completed, and a lot of the hardscape has been poured for those areas as well. Next slide, please. More framing, as you can see on the left-hand side, you can also see the rough-ins for the HVAC ductwork. A lot of the overhead infrastructure is being installed, like low voltage. On the right-hand side, there's another existing playground equipment area on that site where the old equipment is being removed, and we're actually installing brand new playground equipment as well. So that's currently underway. Next slide, please. Below is an existing site plan. Again, you see 8 portables there on the right-hand side. Those have all been relocated, and that is an area where the brand new building and new kinder and parking lot area are going. Next slide, please. This shows a good rendering of the new parking lot area and new building. So the yellow on the right-hand side is the new parking. And then you have the drop off, and then you have the kinder area, which is in pink, and the kinder playground area in green right next to it. Next slide, please. And here you see a rendering of the brand new 5-classroom kinder building, along with the kinder playground area that will be installed as well. Next slide. And that is it for Adams. Any questions? Thank you.
All right, I guess I'll take over for the Sunshine Project. Sunshine is a little bit of a unique project just in the sense that it houses 2 programs there. It has the California Children's Services program, which is a county-led, but it services students within Riverside County, including Riverside Unified School District students. In addition, the students located at this site are strictly special education students, so we're taking a lot of precautions to make sure that the site is incredibly safe. We're a little bit before halfway through on this project. If you could go to the next slide, please. One of the main components of this project is includes the installation of a new portable building, specifically for the California Children's Services Program, so that it gives space back to the Sunshine School. So right now, the portable building for CCS, for short, has been completed. This picture depicts it in the middle of the dishwasher. It shows the appliances that were installed for the students in that program. A lot of them require some life skills training. So they have a small little kitchen, a refrigerator, and a lot of them are taught to do basic cooking skills, and appliances are included in that building for that reason. On the left side, it shows the completed ADA upgrades within the parking lot, including the new landscaping. So it was also part of a beautification project. Prior to that, this site didn't have a real good ADA, a proper walk-up space to the front of the building. So this has been completed already. On the bottom right-hand side, it shows the updates that are being currently worked on in the existing building that will be where the existing building where CCS was located and now is going to house Sunshine students again. Can we go to the next slide? This is a good depiction of how the site was prior to the installation of a new building. If you look at the bottom left-hand side, there are 4 bins that have been since removed. That's where the new building is located. We could go to the next slide so we could see where that's at. This is a pretty good rendering that shows provides an overview of the work that's being done right now. The new building shown in blue has already been completed. The parking lots in front of them, including the walkways, is done. Right now, we're just doing close-up items on that building and have moved the project to a new phase, which includes the renovation of Building A, which is the building in the back that has about 7 classrooms 7 classrooms plus the NPR in the back. Right now, they're working on the center, so that includes the installation or the creation of a new classroom and the removal of administrative offices that were previously used by CCS. Next slide. This is a good rendering that also provides an idea of how the building's going to look like when it's completed. It's going to there's going to be a construction of a new entryway that provides more secure entry, because right now anyone who walks in could just go into the building and it's not very secure. With the updates here, there's going to be an addition of a I guess an anti-wall and a security wall that will stop anyone from just walking in. But this is going to be part of the later part of the project, or one of the later phases. Next page. And this is just another overview. One thing I failed to mention is that in addition to the new building and the modernization that's going on, one thing that this site really required was age-appropriate playground, because prior to the new playground that has been installed, they had a playground that was too big for the students. So a lot of them weren't able to use it, or it just wasn't safe for them to use it. So the new playground that was installed is not only ADA compatible, but it's age appropriate. Next slide. Oh, that's it for me. Any questions on Sunshine? All right, thank you, everyone.
All right, Poly High School is mine. On this one, the major upgrades we're doing there were for the underground utilities. Everything was old from back in the 50s. So underground utilities, gas, water, landscape, sewer, storm drain, all those are being replaced and upgraded with new. And then, as was mentioned earlier in some conversation, that the ADA pass of travel out there were very inadequate. People could not travel and congregate in areas because there just was no areas for wheelchairs or handicapped students to get from one side of the campus to the other. So in this remodel of the campus, the complete interior of the quad was removed and is now being put back into place. So there are ADA ramps, there are seating walls, there's trees and shade structures and all that for the kids to be able to roam the campus. And it also opened up safety for the campus because they have line of sight now. So there was a lot of items removed where kids can't hide behind and do things they're not supposed to do, and just upgraded the whole site for everybody to congregate. It's going to look more kind of like a smaller college campus now. Next slide, please. These are pictures of the new shade structures and concrete areas going in. On the left top is up along the existing gymnasium. To the right, you see one of the shade structures that would be out in front of the admin area to the side of the library. Down below that is just another view or another angle of that same shade structure. And then to the right is the other shade structure, which is on the south side. And that would be in front of their theater area. So they're gonna have two shade structures, one out in front of the admin and one out in front of the theater. Both of them will have amphitheater style seating to where people can congregate. They can have dances, plays, whatever they need to have out there, as well as another area on the north side that has amphitheater seating where they normally hold their dances, so they can set a DJ up on top, and it'll all be very visible now so they can keep an eye on all the students. Next slide, please. To the left is some of the new concrete going in. And to the right, the same, that's just another end of the concrete. You can see a circle kind of in the middle will be some highlights with a grizzly bear paw for just some aesthetics on the site. And to the right is one of the ADA ramps that were installed in that area because before there were none and students could not travel on their own if they were handicapped in wheelchairs, things like that. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the existing campus prior to construction. You can see kind of in the middle of the quad, there's just a lot of cut up areas, a few grass areas, and this was all removed. All concrete in that middle quad was removed. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of what it is going to look like when it's done. The theater, you can kind of see a triangle at the top middle with a bluish area. That is one of the shade structures there that I was explaining where you saw the steel. And then to the right on the bottom, there's a existing 3 classrooms that were turned into one room, which is now going to be the site's flex space, counseling, not counseling, but meeting rooms, site meetings. And then they're also going to be able to rent this space out for other sites to come and use for any kind of training and things like that. And they'll also use it for student testing. Next slide, please. This is the entry porthole that is being built out in the front of the site to where the student access comes in from the student parking lot. Before it was just a single slide chain link fence with a block wall. So it was very tight and convoluted in that area. So now it'll be open for kids to be able to come in. They won't have to stand out on the sidewalk next to the driveway, and it'll be a lot safer for students to stand out there before the school's open. Next slide, please. And this is another area where you can see the shade structure in front of the theater. Actually to the right, I don't know why this one's not showing, but there is a shade structure on the amphitheater seating to the right in front of the admin building, exactly right there. Next slide, please. That was it. Any questions on the Poly High School? All right, Arlington High School is mine also, so I will get into that. This site is being already been bid. We are starting construction, or started in December, and it will be getting an upgrade to the entrance of the admin area and new walkways, and it'll make it safer for students to walk in and out. We're doing a sidewalk down the side of the parking lot where they did not have one before, so the students would just walk down the middle of the parking lot. And then also we're removing 7 portables on that site, and in the place of those 7 portables we will be installing a new biomed building for the students to learn They'll have 3 labs, and then also we'll have their SDC classes in there, which are their special needs, to be able to learn their life skills, kind of like over at the Sunshine School. And then the next building would be an auxiliary gym going, which is we're calling the R building. That's a complete new auxiliary gym for the students to have practice in. They're going to use it as kind of a flex space also. So if they have to do testing, or if there's for some reason to get out of the heat or the cold, they can open that up for students to sit and congregate. And then the building J is an existing J wing that is getting a complete remodel. They have computer arts in there, as well as the STC classes now that will be moved to the new biomed wing. And that is going to be a complete remodel of that school with new air conditioning and all upgraded. There will also be a new ticket booth for the stadium, because there's going to be a stadium upgrade, new seating, visitor side installed, bleachers. The home side will be expanded, as well as getting a press booth so they can have night games there at this school. The lighting will be upgraded, and they will be able to hold graduations and things like that, because they did not have the capabilities of doing this before. So now they will have the capabilities of holding their own games and graduations and items like that. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of some of the first construction that was going on out there. This first slide on the left top is the pad for the new auxiliary gym. And this is when the grading's going on out there. The one below it is the building Q pad. They're doing the underground utilities. There was a lot of utilities under this pad that had to be removed and replaced because it was underneath the building. So we had to reroute and move a lot of the utilities out of the building pad. And the Q building is the biomed. The building, or the picture to the right, is the footings going in for the R building, which is the gym. And it's just an overview of how some of the construction's going on out there. And then also the over excavation, which is where they take the dirt down, compact it, and put it back in for the pad to go in on the new science wing, biomed. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the site prior to construction. Next slide, please. And then this is an overview of what it's going to be like. If you see out in the field area, the blue, 2 blue areas perpendicular to each other or parallel, those are the bleacher upgrades, as well as the lighting's not shown here, but the lighting will be upgraded in that field, in the football field area. The blue area to the bottom, this is the new auxiliary gym area where they already have the footings poured. And then up a little bit to the left is the new biomed in the blue. That's going to be the new science wing with the SDC classes. And then right below that, the J wing has the media arts and was the old SDC classrooms. This is all be media arts and technology teaching in those classes. There will also be a pool upgrade in this one. It has not bid yet, but we are working on that. This is supposed to be going out to bid in the next month or so. Next slide, please. Any questions on Arlington High School?
All right, well, we'll jump into Alcott Elementary School. So construction for Alcott has not started yet. However, we just recently bid the project. We received bids this past Wednesday, January 27th. The bids are scheduled to go to the board in March, and we are scheduled to start that work in early May. The first portion of the work that will start will be the relocation of the existing portables on site that will be used as interim housing. So we will start that grading work, foundation work early May. As a recap, this campus is getting modernizations of existing classrooms, including flooring, paint and casework, ceiling, and HVAC. And we are also constructing a new 2-story 10 classroom building along with a kinder playground area. Next slide. That is the existing site that you see on the top left-hand corner. You see all those portables. That is where the new 2-story building is going, and those portables will be relocated starting this summer. Next slide, please. Below, what you see is a diagram. At top left-hand corner, the blue is the new 2-story building. All the portables that were there are being relocated near the yellow portables at the bottom of the site. You see the 4. There are a certain amount of portables that are staying on the site, but most of them will be used for interim housing and will be demolished subsequent to construction. And you also see the buildings on site in orange. Those are the buildings that are getting new modernization. And we are also doing a lot of landscaping irrigation improvements to the site as well. Next slide, please. That is a rendering of the new 2-story building that will be constructed on the site with the kindergarten playground area in front of it. Next slide, please. And that is it for Alcott. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, the next project, Anna, can you jump in on this one?
This is Monroe project. And Eric, this is your project, though. You want to go over it?
Oh, go ahead, Eric. Sorry about that.
Yes, we are preparing to bid this job. We've been working on it. We just had a job walk on the 28th, which is yesterday, for contractors to come see the site. It will be getting a new kinder wing, 5 classrooms. And also we're remodeling all the classroom buildings on site, the existing classroom buildings. We're getting new data, new air conditioning, new duct work, and minor upgrades on the interiors of the classrooms, new ceilings. And then the admin, we're moving around some of the items in there, cleaning up there's 2 classrooms that are getting moved into there, and their staff workroom will get remodeled on that building. We will be bidding this project on the 18th of next month. We're hoping to come in with some low bids, and depending on where we're at, we're just hoping to move forward quickly on this project. Next slide. This is an existing overview of the site. The 4 portables on the left will be moved or relocated. 3 of them will be reused for interim housing. 1 will be relocated permanently next to the portables on the right on the top. And then the new building will go in the location of those portables there. Next slide, please. So the blue buildings in the middle are the classroom buildings A, B, C, and D that are remodeled. The G wing is the admin. We'll be doing some minor work in there, some ADA upgrades with the restrooms. And then off the end, in between each one of those wings, A, B, C, and D, there are restrooms that will be getting ADA upgrades to where they have access to the restrooms from the upper level, which is in the white, and the lower level playground level right now, because the students only have access from the upper levels. So they will have extra restrooms top and bottom on these ones. And then to the left on the side is the new kinder wing, which will be a 1-story 5 classroom wing. It will get new playground equipment, new bike tracks, some shade structures, and some seating walls for the kids to sit on and congregate. And as well at the bottom right, you'll see a new parking area and drop off. This will be the new bus drop off and also staff parking. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the facade of the building, the new kinder wing, what it's going to look like. You can see the shade structures. The kids have the new play areas, and as well as they'll have playground equipment out in this area. Next slide, please. Any questions on Monroe?
Okay, this is Fremont Elementary School. This project is in the bid process right now. We recently had a few job walks. This project includes modernization and new construction. The modernization is minor. It's basically some flooring on the existing classrooms, and then coating of the roof and on existing classrooms. It also includes relocation some portables and demolition of an existing kindergarten building and some portables. So it's only going to be, I think it's 4 portables are going to be demolished, and then the kindergarten building. It also, the new construction involves new parking lot, a 2-story classroom building and kindergarten building, a new kindergarten play area, and then also a parking lot. That's going to be to the level of the street out of Orange. This project is hoping to bid on I think next month on the 18th and start construction sometime in early May. Like I said, we were in the process of doing some job walks and probably clarifying some questions for the vendors or the actual contractors. Next slide, please. This shows the existing site. You can see on the field on the right bottom corner, that's where the 2-story building is going to be built. It's an L-shaped type building. There's also going to be a parking lot towards the street, which is the right side of this site plan. It shows orange. So that's where they're going to be putting in the parking lot. They can see that there's a total of 8 portables there. 4 of those portables are going to be relocated within the site. 1 will be used for a Head Start. The other 4 will be, and the other 3 will be relocated within the site. I think it's in the bottom. It's actually in the mid-size of the left side of this picture here, of the site plan. Okay, next slide, please. Right there, it shows, you can see on the, this is the format a little different, but you can see off of Orange Street, you can see the new parking lot. And then in the blue, you see the 2-story building, and then the kindergarten building right next to it, which is a 1-story. You could also see the buildings in orange, and even the administration area. There's going to be some ADA upgrades to those restrooms, and then the minor modernization to those existing buildings in orange. And you can see the Head Start is going to be built right next to the parking lot. It's like a turquoise color there. And then the portables will be relocated with the side. There should be 3 portables. Next slide, please. As you can see, here's a picture of the 2-story building. You see the 2-story there, and then right next to it is the kindergarten, and you see the play area there in the facade there. The other picture shows, an actual elevation of the new building. Next slide, please. Any questions on Fremont Elementary School? Thank you.
All right, everyone. For Longfellow, can we go through skip 2 more slides, please? There we go. I like this slide just because it kind of gives a really good overview of the existing site conditions as well as what's being proposed. If you look at the bottom area, there's shapes that are outlined in red. Those are existing structures that are there right now, which includes a cul-de-sac that we're in the process of vacating with the city of Riverside. The 2 structures in red on the left side include 2 single-family residences and the garage in the back, which will be demolished as a process to put the parking lot for student drop-off and pickup, as well as parking for staff members. Because as it stands right now, this site has no on-site parking. So parking is a very, very difficult thing at this Longfellow site. In addition to that, there are 12 portables that you'll see lined up against the streets on the southern part of the property line, in addition to being lined up where the building A and B will eventually go. All of those portables will be removed and demolished, and the new 2-story building that will be added will include 10 classrooms. That's the long building on the left, and then there's going to be another second building that includes 2 classrooms for preschool, and then an administrative building that's labeled Building A. In addition to that, there's going to be modernization that is included throughout the school. It's going to be new paints, new lighting, new exterior paint as well, in addition to improvements to the roof system, utilities, fire alarm. So it's a pretty fledged large scale project here. Right now, this is slated to go to bid next year. So there's a lot of stuff that we're still working out and getting cleared up, including the vacation of that 7th Street cul-de-sac. That's going to be going to City Council for its first hearing next week, I believe, on the 2nd, if I remember correctly. And then the public hearing will be held in March. Next slide, please. This is a rendering, an early rendering of how that 2-story building is going to look like. There have been some changes to the materials that are going to be used. Colors also are not have not been decided yet, but it just gives you a general idea of how the structure is going to look from the interior of the site. Next slide. That's it. Any questions on Longfellow? All right, thank you all.
University Heights is a middle school we have out there in the district, and we will be doing a remodel, adding 5 new classrooms on the existing building. We're relocating their library to another building to make room for more classrooms in the main building, as well as doing upgrades to the roof. We're adding solo tube lighting in the classrooms to give more light in those rooms, as well as paint on the interior as well as exterior. And then we're doing removing some portables from the site to make room for other buildings in the future. Next slide, please. This is an existing overview site of the area. The existing building is the to the left in the middle. Looks like 4 or 5 roofs put together, but there'll be classroom buildings going in the voids in between each one of these classroom wings. So you see 4 there will be the new, and then in the middle of the building is going to be where the existing library is. There'll be more classrooms added in that area. Next slide, please. So here you see in the purple, kind of bluish purple, those are the new classroom wings that will be added in between the nooks. The ones in the middle, the lighter color, are the library that will be changed into classrooms. And then the library will be relocated to 2 classrooms that were in this building here, the purple up in the middle there. And then as well, down a little bit to the right in the blue, there's a band room that'll be expanded, added to, and basically doubled in size to give the teaching area and the band room more space for them. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the existing site. So this is an existing school. And as you see there where the UHMS Wolves is, that's going to be like one of the new classroom wings. And then we'll be doing ADA upgrades to the parking area, as well as the sidewalks and walkways in the front. Next slide, please. Any questions on university?
Thank you, Eric. Nadia?
Yes, so the John W. North High School, this project is currently in the very early design phase stages. Currently, we do have an architect on board, Go Architects. As far as DSA submittal, bidding, and award, that is to be determined. Like mentioned, it's a very early stages of design. Currently, what we've been working on is we have formed a vision and design committee, and we've met so far with that committee twice. We actually have another committee meeting scheduled in February. We have been working with Go Architects on meeting with a lot of the district employees, including maintenance and operations and the staff, walking the site and having meetings to determine what the needs are on the campus and what improvements would be required. As of now, based on that information, we do not have a scope of work for the project. We are in the phase where we are gathering data to see what the needs of the campus are based on the community input, based on the staff input at the site, and also our maintenance and operations department. So that is currently the update for that project.
I do have a question on that. Is that committee inclusive of students, parents, and community members?
That, yes, that is correct. It is included. The only one I would have to double check on, and I don't know, Anna, if you recall, is students, but I know community members, yes, parents, yes, absolutely.
Yes, this is Sergio. There are students of North,
not remember, I apologize.
but in addition to North High School students, there's also RUSD students and CBU students in the architectural program that are also participating in the design committee.
Thank you.
If that helps. Mhm. All right. Thank you, Nadia. Next slide. Next slide. Great. Thank you. I just want to first, before I jump on the neighborhood schools, just to say, I mean, this is just so impressive. I'm so grateful and very impressed with the staff. You know, we went through the 16 schools in groups A, B, and C. That's just a phenomenal. A lot of the work, the achievement that we've been doing and getting us in line for state funding. Staff's been busy. It's unheard of this magnitude of projects moving into construction all at the same time. So we're very grateful. And I see a hand. Mr. Evans, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. What do you use a 5% contingency on most of these projects, and or what contingency do you use? And then secondly, now that you've had enough of them to experience, what amount of the contingency overall has been used? And then finally, what percentage of the money that's been spent on these schools has been used with contractors in Riverside? Thank you.
Okay, good question. Starting from the last comment, last question, in terms of number of contractors that live within Riverside, I don't have that information with me. However, note that this is a bid process. So we don't select contractors based on where they live or where their office is located. This is open to as a bid process. So you may have contractors.
Sergio, I'm sorry to interrupt. I understand that. I'm just asking what the outcome of the bidding process is. How many of them have gone to Riverside contractors? I know you don't have a preference.
Gotcha.
We'll have a competitive bid.
Yeah, in a future meeting, we could provide you maybe a quick overview of existing projects and where the contractors have been located.
Okay, that sounds good.
And in terms of contingency, it varies project to project. However, in budgeting purposes on projects, we do have a contingency roughly about 10%. And then also there's escalation contingencies too. We have to be very, very conservative as we plan and budget projects, because in some cases, again, the construction market changes roughly. But part of these is overall macro level, we do have contingencies for escalation and projects, unforeseen areas of the project. Hopefully that answers the question.
But how much of the contingency have you actually had to use?
Each project is different. Typically, like for example, when you're in construction, change orders could be on a typical modernization project could be between 3% to 6%. But depending on the modernization and the age of the project, if you get into modernization and start going into infrastructure, you come across some unforeseens in some cases. You know, as one of our project managers mentioned, there's underground tanks or there's other things. Those contingencies or those change orders could can go up. You know, it could go up to 10%. But roughly right now, if I had to guess, and again, I don't have that in front of me, you know, our change orders are running between 3% and 6%.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would be interested to know. That's a pretty good number.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can add, Sergio, like right now, most of the projects that we're still wrapping them up. Like I said, our Jefferson is going to go to the board. So we're still wrapping up change orders, and we'll need to look and see how much of that contingency is going to be expended. Hyger, which recently wrapped up end of last year, we're still closing it up, taking it to the board in March. So we're still looking at the final numbers. I can tell you that we will have some savings, maybe close to about $300,000. But again, we're still wrapping that up. So we'll be close to that number. if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, moving forward, and this now takes us into the neighborhood schools, the new schools here. The question was asked, well, was there enrollment projections? How did you come up with the need of adding new schools to the program? And early on, back in 2016, 17, the board did have board workshops and study sessions regarding asking the question, where do we need neighborhood schools? We know that there is growth, new growth areas where we need new construction. But in the case of Casablanca, East Side, these are neighborhoods that had an elementary school back in the 60s. Their schools were shut down, part of a desegregation and so forth. And in doing that, specifically here for Casablanca, this area buses, there's 6 schools that service the Casablanca area. So we're busing students from this neighborhood. And again, the intent of bringing back their school, their neighborhood school, there's a lot of benefits and so forth that maybe another time we can go through all those discussions. But this has nothing to do with future students or growth. This is existing students in our community in the Casablanca area that we're busing and bringing their neighborhood school is going to eliminate or reduce drastically the busing and really bring in a community school within the Casablanca area. The Casablanca project currently is in the visioning and programming phase. There's a design committee formed. They have met 3 times. The first meeting was in November. I know it says here December, but they met in November, December, and again in January, made up of different stakeholders and representatives. They're part of this project in moving forward with the visioning, the programming, and the educational specifications of this project so that the design team can then move into schematics and design. So this is moving along. We're very excited about this project and bringing back a school that this neighborhood drastically needs. The next slide. This just gives you a reference point. The blue boundary is the Casablanca neighborhood. The red areas where it says proposed school, that's the 10-acre site where the new Casablanca area school will be developed. Next slide. This is just a very conceptual site plan. This was used in the CEQA documents, but again, this was just more as a reference, conceptual site plan of the new school. Next slide. The next project is the East Side Neighborhood School, and this is again falls similar to the Casablanca East Side Neighborhood School, or the East Side area, which is the blue boundaries that you see here. That is the East Side neighborhood community. Back in the 60s, there was an elementary school here. And again, because of the desegregation and so forth, their school was closed down. And in that, we are busing about 1,400 students on a daily basis to 7 different schools, or 7 schools service the East Side neighborhood. This area is very highly populated, very dense. There's really not open space to just like Casablanca. There's 10 acres that we can, that we were able to acquire to put a school there. Here in East Side is a little bit different. It's for the most part, it's fully developed. And so to come up with 8 to 10 acres, which is the typical or average size of an elementary, it's challenging. But we're happy to report that there is several properties that we're interested in next to the Lincoln High School. There's about 20 plus properties that we have been actively, as a direction of our Board of Education, acquiring and working with property owners who are willing to work with us and offer their properties. We have purchased 9 properties, and there's 4 in escrow as of today. And we're continuing to work with property owners. We are also at the same time started the CEQA process. And this is an important process of a project to really analyze the environmental impacts of a new school and also surrounding surrounding uses that would impact a school. So we're in that process right now. There is an architect assigned. PBK Architects has been assigned. And also we are in the process of forming a design committee / communications committee. And this committee will be, again, stakeholders from the community and community members within the East Side neighborhood to help us through the communication and providing them status. And ultimately, they will be part of the actual designing and working with the design team on this project. So we're in the early stages. We're in the site phase of the project. So I just want to provide that update to you. Next slide. This next project is the Spring Mountain Ranch. And this was a little bit different than Casablanca and Eastside. This actually has to do with growth. Back in, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, in the Twain area, in the Lake and Matthew area, there was a lot of new development and there were new schools built there. In the same case here with Spring Mountain Ranch or the High Grove community, there is a community being built there of 1,400 new homes, single family homes. There's a lot of open space for residential growth in the future. This area of town only has one elementary school, which is the High Grove Elementary. And as we're seeing the growth in construction and in new homes, with new homes, new families move in. With new families move in, there's also new children that move in. And when we are tasked to provide a classroom and to service our new students. So this is an area that is growing, that is generating new students, and we're preparing to provide a new school for that population. Now we're in the process here in this project. We've purchased the land. The Department of Education has certified the location of the school. An architect the design team has been formed. This is Bruno Clark Architects. And we're also in the process of forming a design / communications committee. In fact, we have reported twice to the High Grove MAC, Municipal Advisory Commission, I believe is MAC stands for. They're an active group in the county that they have, and they hold community meetings, and we reported to them and introduced the team, the design team, and gave them an update on where we're at with the committee, and offered and asked if there's any members in the High Grove community who are interested in serving in this committee to please contact us. And so we're in that process of forming this committee and moving forward with this project. There's still a lot of work to do. We're in the preliminary stages, but it's slowly moving forward. Next slide. This slide here was added. This is the King High School modernization. Next slide. This was added because we have used Measure O funds in terms of this project. Originally, one of the first stages of this project was adding an access point on the backside of the school on Van Buren, and this had to do with traffic and pedestrian safety. If you know King High School, this is our largest high school in terms of enrollment. Over 3,000 students attend this school, and the only access to the school is through Wood Street, and it gets very congested in traffic and pedestrian and access to the school. So we started with this project with creating a driveway drop-off area behind the school. That started. We have an architect on that. We bid this project, I believe, 3 times, and the bids were just not good timing. So what we're doing now, and back again in November in the data that I shared earlier on, this King High School is one of those projects that we're moving forward with the designing, the initial stages, the boots on the ground, which this project is now incorporated into the modernization project. It is scheduled to begin that process in the next year or so. Next slide. And the STEM High School, the STEM Center. This is a project that we're in the initial stages of this project. We're in the site phasing of the project. If as a reference point, where are we? And this project has, this is in a partnership with UCR University. The UCR has offered, we're now in the 4th location, the 4th site, which we're calling the Blaine site. Again, we're in the due diligence. We've gone through 3 other locations. We've gone through our due diligence, site analysis, site surveying, site testing, and so forth. And now we're on the 4th location. We are working with the city. Next slide. On this location here. This is just a quick rendering or a graphic of the Blaine site. Here on this site, where again, as I mentioned, we're in the early stages of the just siting and going through our due diligence and exploring, surveying the site, making sure this is an appropriate location for the STEM center. In terms of where we're at, there is a community meeting that's being set up, or I believe it's in the process of being set up for sometime in March. So I believe in April, and then soon after that, then we'll begin with the environmental CEQA process. So CEQA hasn't even started yet. We're very early on, preliminary stages on this project. One of the things that the board did give us direction on back in May 2020 is that this project will not move into construction until we begin receiving state funding. And then, as you remember, that graphic that I was showing, state funding could start, back, and I think after 2026 and so forth. So we're ways out there until we start seeing state funding coming in. Then this project will then move into construction. However, in order to qualify for state funding, this project needs to be shovel ready. And shovel ready meaning there needs to be a design, construction documents, all state approvals. The CEQA process has to be approved by the UCR's regents and also by our board. When the CEQA document is completed, that's the official approval of the project. So right now, we're not there yet. We're again in the early stages of the siting of the school. Next slide. Okay, so that was a long discussion, a long overview and update of where we're at in terms of active projects that have used Measure O funds. And one thing that I do want to point out, and as Tarana prepares to jump in and help us with budgeting and finance side of it, remember that these projects are multi-funded. We're using Measure O funds, we're using state funding, we're using developer fees, CFD fees. So these, again, multi-funded to maximize our dollars, again, to get us all the way through our groups A through H and the projects in the new schools that we went over. So it's a very dynamic program. We're very proud of our staff. And we're excited as each day moves and we're moving into construction. We're very happy and blessed to be where we're at today. So with that, Tarana, if you don't mind jumping in.
Absolutely. Hello again. On this page, we have the budgets for the projects that are currently underway. And these are the budgets that are set aside from the current 2 bond measures that I went over on the first page, the bonds that have been issued. So those are the preliminary budgets. As the budgets are finalized and as the budgets are closed, they're adjusted accordingly. In addition to that, this document is a dynamic and cumulative document. So every report that you get is an add-on from the previous report, and so that you don't have to be keeping all of your copies. It's a document that you can always, if anybody has a question about any of the projects going on or the cost and so forth, it will all be here. One of the things that you will see, there is a completed project section here. So as projects are completed, they'll be moving into that end section. So far, Sierra has been completed, as well as High Grove. And next report, you'll probably see Jefferson and Harrison move to the end. So as projects are done, they'll be moving, and the projects that are active are going to be in the front section. So this basically has the current budget, and as the bidding results come in, you'll be seeing the updated numbers for those new schools. Next page, please. As Sergio mentioned, the district is augmenting its Measure O funds with all kinds of revenue sources that are available to it, state grants being one of the biggest revenue sources that it's available to it. All the funding sources that you're seeing here, those are the current modernization grants that the district is eligible for. The items in pink are already approved have gone through the various state steps, approval steps, and these are funds that are going to be funded from the current Prop 51 state school bond. So the district will be getting these funds within the next few months. All of the other ones that are in white are projects for which the district is eligible and it is in line for funding, but they will require a next state school bond approval by the voters, which is slated for 2022 right now. And the schools that are not included here are any of the new schools that the district is going to be embarking on. Any questions on this page? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, as I mentioned, you will have, next slide, please. You will have cumulative expenditure information on Measure O projects, as well as a further project breakdown, which is a purview of the COC to review the expenditures and make sure that they are for the projects that the voters approved. So this document is cumulative, so we'll have expenditures from day one. But for the backup section, you know, as I go through that, it will be reduced to current fiscal year because of the level of activity. Since we met last time, this report, this column, blue column, reflects the expenditures since last time, and the district has paid almost $30 million in the past 3 months. So there are lots of payments and warrants and expenditures that are being processed for the 16 schools that are currently in process. So we will be highlighting the activities since last period, and you'll be seeing the cumulative expenditures for the bond funds, what the budgets are, and what the status is. Next slide, please. So here is the total. This basically is a breakdown of what you saw on the first page of how much has been spent in total, which is the 119 million, and then currently 61 million.
Is your hot tub open?
Huh?
If you can, thank you.
Okay, sorry. So this gives you the breakdown of how those funds that were highlighted on the first page on the bar chart have been spent on each one of the campuses. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Next slide, please. Here you have a breakdown of all of the campuses that are currently active in this current fiscal year, the school campuses, who the vendors are that have been paid for those schools, what their description of the services is, and how much has been spent and committed. So not only do you have a cumulative history of the total all budget, commitments, expenditures, and balances, you now have the detail for each of the vendors that are working under each school. So this gives you an idea of all the various vendors. There's commonality in some of them because of the bidding process. There may be new vendors. And so this particular section is limited to a fiscal year, like I said, because of the level of activity. But for the new members, if you ever need to see any of the expenditures, we have basically from a micro to a macro level of data, all of it tying back to the district's financial records with the county of Riverside treasurer. So we have every single item documented, and it's all in there and it's available for you. And you can also refer to the prior reports that are on the district's website. So here is a breakdown of the expenditures. And next slide, please. Keep going to the completed section. So this is all just the financial backup for this fiscal year. Next slide, please. Yeah, we can go to the end of this, please. Yeah, the format is changed a little bit because we've vastly upgraded our system and to make it easier, and we have a lot more tools and so forth. So you're seeing a little bit of a different look. And like I said, the completed projects will be moved to this section. Next slide, please. So you will have that information. It will show a status completed. It will show the final budget of that particular project and when the completion date was. So this is the end of my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
In the completed project part, that's where you'll show if the project was on budget, over budget, under budget?
Right now, I'm showing the total completed cost, but if you would like, I'll be happy to add an item that says original budget and completed budget and what that difference was, if that would be helpful to you.
That would be, thank you.
It would also be helpful, I'm sorry, it would also be helpful to highlight, because I know you have other funds, but of the Measure O funds.
Yes, I'll be happy to. As far as the expenditure and the backup for the expenditures are concerned, you're only seeing Measure O. But for the budget, the budget is sometimes multi-funded. For example, Harrison is multi-funded. Some of the other projects off top of my head are multi-funded. So the budget reflects all of the other funding sources, but the expenditures that you see are limited to what's been funded from the bond. So we'll be happy to show you when the project is completed what the ultimate funding sources were and what those dollar amounts were, because we not only track the bond funds, we track all of the other funds that are coming into place for these projects. So I'll be happy to add that in the next report.
I have a.
Sure.
Okay. Speaking of other funding sources, for one of your new schools, Spring Mountain Ranch area, it was mentioned that some new construction is going on there. With that new construction, is there additional like Melrose that's helping to pay for that new proposed site, or is the intent strictly Measure O?
I can answer that, or you can help me, Tarana.
Sure, absolutely. Go ahead, Sergio, first.
With SB 50, and which is the school facilities program, state funding, and so forth. There are some changes in terms of developers working with school districts in terms of negotiating land or dedicating land for school sites. This area of Spring Mountain Ranch is a growth area. There's, I believe, like 1,400 new single-family homes. The developers there are paying their fair share in terms of developer fees. Our district statutory fees, level 1 fees and level 2 fees, our district is actually collecting level 2 fees. So these developers have paid developer fees and still paying developer fees as they pull permits. So we've been collecting developer fees. I believe there is a small CFD on a developer who formed a CFD in that region, but it's fairly small. But yes, developers, not only residential developers, but also commercial developers, they would need to pay their fair share, not only to the school district, but also to the city and county. In this case, would be Moore County. So yes, we are collecting developer fees in that area.
And I'll be happy to add another slide to the report if it would be helpful at the next meeting. All of the different funding sources that the district has been accessing. They include developer fees, as Sergio mentioned. They include community facility district bonds, which he mentioned a small CFD. There are also redevelopment agency funds. There's also Prop 39 funds, state grants. And so it's a huge program. You're seeing a little slice of it. But, for the purpose of the district coordinating and making strategic plans, all of those funding sources come into play. And all of those also have their own restrictions and their own, you cannot use developer fees for modernization, for example. So there are a lot of things that need to take place in the strategic planning part of what revenue source is best to use for these projects. And that's a discussion that's ongoing with district staff.
And Tarana, one of the things that there's been some misinformation or I've masked a few times is that why didn't the district form a CFD on the Spring Mountain Ranch? And to clarify that, the district does not form CFDs at our will. These are a property owner, in this case, a developer who has a project. They reach out to the city, the district, or other local agencies to form a CFD. And this is really for the developer to use the CFD as a mechanism to pay for their impact fees and put it on the new resident, the new property owner, to pick up those fees as what we call Melrose. But this is solely the developer is the one who forms and requests that formation. We participate on it as a district and forming a CFD because we collect our developer fees through the bonds that this Melrose is created, but that is still developer fees that we collect. But there's a misinformation that forming a CFD is going to pay for 100% of a new, in this case, a new elementary. That is not the case. the CFDs or even developer fees is just a small portion of the cost of a new elementary. So I just wanted to clarify that because there's been a lot of information thrown out there that if the district would have formed a CFD, we would have had the developer pay for the school 100%, and that is not the case. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Yeah, just to give you a little bit of perspective, like currently the district has, twice the size of the bond of other funding sources, current and future, to fund its projects, and the equation for the strategic planning on and planning the timing of these projects.
I see two members with their hand up, Mr. Garcia and Mr. Evans. I'm not sure who was first, but Mr. Garcia, did you have a question?
Mr. Evans was first.
Okay, Mr. Evans.
Oh,
you
that's
had a
okay.
question?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Sergio, in reference to Spring Mountain, you said that one's already has started.
The
elementary school
forming the design communications committee in our has been assigned. So in terms of starting is the initial stage of same as Casablanca. Casablanca actually is a little bit ahead of it. We've had 3 meetings with the design team. Spring Mountain Ranch, it's a little bit behind, but early in the initial stages, Mr. Garcia.
So the additional funding for that is the developer fees to help with that project.
Yes, developer fees, as Tarana mentioned, these projects are multi-funded. So developer fees are part of that project to pay the engineers, the architects, the design team, the environmental consultants, consultants that are working on the project, purchasing of the land, the initial. So that's where we use those funds to move the project forward.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Evans, I apologize again. I feel like I'm interrupting, but before we continue with discussion, I think it would be best to take our public comment and then continue committee discussion so that.
Okay, I see 2 of them with your hand up, and as soon as we're done with public comment, I'll give you a chance to speak. Go ahead with your
sure.
public.
I'm going to go ahead and share my timer. Just a second. I know that I believe Mr. Hunter, go ahead.
Good evening now. I'm Jason Hunter, Ward 1 of Riverside, California. So for the new members on the committee, should know the history of what happened with Measure O and the bait and switch that occurred. So there was no language within the master facility plan, which was incorporated into the bond program, which is really the specific project list required under the California Constitution. No language of any of these new schools, nor was there any language of any of these new schools in any of the propaganda that the pieces that RUSD sent out to the residents before they voted on Measure O. So the citizenry here really did believe that they were getting their old schools fixed. And of course, once the bond passed, what happened was the district had been in secret conversations with different varying constituencies and special interests to all of a sudden take that money and come up with this special project list, these 5 projects mentioned here at the end of the presentation, the 4 new schools and the King parking lot. And all of a sudden, these 5 projects, heretofore unmentioned to the general public at least, went right to the top of the priority list, right to the very top, out of nowhere. And that's proven in the documentation that I've seen, extensive documentation, including, when the committee first met, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, we had the same kind of big booklets with all the school projects in them. And none of the new projects were actually in those big packages like the one you just saw. We used to get a physical copy of it until after about a year of the committee actually even being in existence. So people want to say, it's here, it's there. It was nowhere. This was a bait and switch. And what that means, especially now with no school bond, state school bond measure being passed, is that a lot of the projects, there's A through J or whatever it is on their project list. A lot of those projects towards the lower end of that list are now not going to be built. And so a lot of these kids who thought their schools were they're going to be moved out of the portables, or they're going to get new HVAC systems or whatever. they're going to be staying in the same crumbling buildings and dilapidated schools because interest came in, and I believe there's several members on our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee that actually represent these special interests in getting their specific schools built. And it's wrong, quite frankly. It will be exposed, and a lot of people will be ruined in the process. And so I hope that the committee finds its path here and finds its way and does the right thing and sends a strong message to the district that the bait and switch will not stand, and sends a strong message to the district. That's sort of it in a nutshell. And anybody that disagrees with that has been removed from the committee now by staff, and with the sort of guilty trustee members who have sort of perpetrated this bait and switch on the public. But you will not squelch us. I guarantee it. You'll hear from us.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Mr. Dawson, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the 5 new projects, the 4 brand new schools, they are illegal. They are illegal. And this was intentional. And the evidence that this was intentional is there is a picture you can find it on the internet of the school board sitting with the chancellor. They're all smiling, getting their picture taken after having signed a MOU for the STEM high school proposal, and that was before Measure O. If they wanted to fund that project with Measure O, it should have been put before the voters. But I think what happened was there was a calculation done that if we put it before the voters won't approve it. So they kept these 4 new schools off the ballot, and then approved it with a supplemental list after the fact. And I am here tonight, I am asking you, I'm making a formal request for this committee to review Measure O, review Prop 39, and that specific section about the need for, what makes the projects legal, in that certified specific project list. And I want a finding and a report on whether this is legal or not. I want a report. I'm making that formal request to you. And if you're not, I don't want the report prepared by RUSD's bond counsel, because he represents the district who's doing this. I want it from you. You're supposed to be doing the oversight here on behalf of all the voters. And if you're not willing to honor my request, I'd like a letter to that effect and stating why. I'd also like to know what is your method for people in the citizenry that you're supposed to be representing. What is, if you're not going to honor my request, then in bringing you a legal concern about this bond, what is the process for the public to trigger your examination of this question? Is it by petition? How is it? Or do you really just serve RUSD as a rubber stamp? This is wrong. This is wrong. And these projects, it's not about the merits of the projects. It's not an emotional thing. This is a legality question. And I contend that there's an abuse of Prop 39. Prop 39 lowered the threshold for approving a bond, but in exchange, it had requirements. And one of them was putting a list before the voters so they knew what they were voting for. I want that question answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. At this moment, Mr. Nelson, that concludes the public comment from individuals that entered the queue at the beginning of this discussion item. At the close of the committee discussion, I will open the queue for our last discussion agendized item.
Thank you very much. Mr. Evans?
Yes, thank you. There's no action tonight on this item. This is just a receive and file, essentially, correct?
I believe it's just a discussion item.
Okay. One of the things that I've been on this committee, I didn't realize it since 2017. And the STEM high school continues to be an item of discussion. And it seems like if I recall as you were going through the costs, it looks like about $500,000 have been spent so far searching for a site. And now you're on site number 4. And I guess what I'd be interested in, and those are Measure O dollars, I presume, is being spent for that search. What is the contingency if the site number 4 doesn't work out? And I guess what I would suggest, and this is, not for big discussion tonight probably, but I would suggest that you consider North High School as site 5 as a contingency, since are going to be working there anyway. But it just seems concerning to me that we've been spending all this money looking for a site on this particular school.
Okay. I believe when we get to committee member comments, we could add that as an agenda item for the next meeting so that we can have a full debate and discussion on it.
Okay.
I think that's appropriate. Mr. Bristow? You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. I just want to, I guess, ask staff sort of a fundamental question. It's my understanding that Measure O assesses, for lack of a better term, a property tax on every property owner within Riverside Unified School District for purposes of repaying the Measure O bonds, both principal and interest. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. It's $60 per 100,000 assessed value of the properties within the boundaries of the district.
Okay. So that every property owner within the district pays the same assessed share per 100,000 for the Measure O bonds, including places like Spring Mountain Ranch and Casablanca and every place within the district boundaries.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. This is a normal bond, not a school, the special area bonds. There are some bonds that are for specific areas and exclude others. And this one is not like that. This is a district-wide bond.
Thank you.
Mr. Nelson, it came to my attention that we had a member of the public who had his hand raised during public comment.
Okay.
Mr. Richard Davis. I'm not sure if you would like to take that comment or
yeah, I think we should take that comment, please.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
As the former member of the committee, I just want to thank you all for your time in serving this committee. As you've seen tonight, beautiful pictures of what Measure O was meant to be used in groups A through C. As Mr. Hunter pointed out, beyond those groups, those communities, students, parents, teachers will not see the benefit of Measure O. It's really a shame. The new committee members should know that hundreds of community groups have spoken up in public meetings, including board meetings, expressing opposition to the way that some of the Measure O money is being funded. For example, the new high school bill, which is in 2 miles of existing high school, when student population at the high school is decreasing over the years, the district's going to put $35 million of that Measure O set aside for years in hopes that a new city bond or state bond is passed when we know our schools are in that $35 million. As new board members or committee members, you will have no say in how much each project is budgeted. You will have no say in what priorities the projects are listed. As a committee, the fact that the student enrollment has decreased by nearly 600 students in RUSD, you will have no say in stopping the building of future school projects, construction. As an oversight committee, you have the obligation to accountable to the taxpayers. Sadly, as an independent oversight committee, you will find that you have no authority to direct the board, district, and the spending of Measure O. You will find responsibility to oversee invoices to make sure they're appropriate under Measure O. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I see no more member comments. Anyone have any comments or questions before we move on to the next item? Okay, the next item is the CBOC annual report, and I'll ask staff if they want to open up public comment for that.
Well, so thank you, Mr. Nelson. If you're a member of the public who has joined the Zoom call today to comment on agenda item number 3 of the discussion items, you may now enter the queue by using the raise hand function if you're logged in using a computer, or *9 if you're using a phone to call in. Once again, this is for agenda item number 3 on the discussion item list. And as a reminder, we will be taking comments after staff presentation.
I'm not sure, does Anna have a presentation on that, or?
No, Mr. Nelson, this was just a quick update that the report was going to the March board. And so you wanted to bring it to the attention of the committee and ask if anyone wanted to volunteer to assist you in presenting.
Yeah, that's true. This was my item. Now that just so the new committee member knows, Mr. Fromm and I put this together with Anna, and it was really directed by the former chair and vice chair, and the staff acted to accommodate the process of putting this report together. They did not present the report. The only question in the report that gets a little confusing is the time frame for which we're reporting to the board, and that was some issue. But the report has been premiered by Mr. Fromm, the former chair, and myself and staff, and we're presenting it at the March 4th board meeting. I'd ask any other member who wants to attend that meeting and support the presentation to please do so.
Mr. Nelson, would you like to take public comment now before committee discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
That was kind of the presentation on what the event was.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open it. I see that Jason Hunter was first in line. I'm sorry, if you'll just bear with me just a second, because I closed out my timer on accident. I apologize. Sorry about that. Okay, there we go. All right, Jason, go ahead.
Once again, good evening. I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention that there's never been a vote on whether any of the new schools or even the King parking lot were proper expenditures of Measure O. I've gone into the report from the previous year, and it's kind of embarrassing because I was on the committee at that point in time, where it mentions that we've had that discussion. We've actually had a formal vote, but in fact, it's never actually happened. So the report from last year needs to be fixed as part of this year's report, in my opinion, because it doesn't have the proper recordation of the votes that actually did occur. There were votes to close discussion. There were votes that failed for a lack of second. But there's no vote actually on whether or not these new schools at King Park were proper expenditures. And I hope that's not noted in this report either. As I said, it was a mistake in the previous year's report that needs to be fixed, okay, for the sake of just getting it right. I've looked back in the minutes to see all the individual meetings we've had, and my memory serves that the minutes are correct, and our annual report is incorrect as to that specifically because anyway, just my 2 cents. Thank you. I hope you make those fixes. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Mr. Dawson? Mr. Dawson, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We could hear you now. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Look, Mr. Davis misspoke. I think he was being cynical. Prop 39 says that committee must ensure that bond funds are properly spent as proposed on the ballot. The committee can then appeal to a judge to stop expenditures and halt construction on projects if the committee feels the funds are being improperly spent. And I tell you that those 4 new schools and the King parking lot, they were not on the Measure O that was put before the voters, and therefore they are improper, they're illegal, and they need to be stopped. And I want you to take this issue up. I'm a member of the public, a taxpayer who's paying this damn bond, and my wife's a teacher. I support schools, don't get me wrong, but I want things to be done legally and honestly, and I feel that the board is pulling a fast one, and it's intentional. And as an oversight committee, you're supposed to be there to examine issues that are brought to you like this and take a hard stand on behalf of the taxpayers. And it has nothing to do with merits of the project. Now, with that STEM high school, I have to tell you, they don't want to put it at North High because they wanted to put it at UCR so their students, our students, could avail themselves of UCR's labs and professors. And I also brought up the issue of safety for those students. And when the school board discussed the issues that we brought up at that workshop meeting that nobody else attended, it was the male board members that said, yes, we need to fence this project to provide for the safety of our students. It was the 2 female board members that said, oh, no. In fact, Patricia Lock-Dawson said, I don't want it fenced. I want our young women to have the same college experience I had when I went to college. I was dumbfounded. These are minors. And this school, so they've decided to fence it. But if they fence it and you're not going to allow them to use the professors and the labs, because the UCR students said, hey, we're paying a lot of money and we don't get the time in the labs and with our professors as we should. Well, now the district's saying they're going to fence it to keep the students safe. Well, there's no reason to put the STEM high school on the UCR campus because they're not going to use UCR. So you could put the STEM high school anywhere, but really it shouldn't be built because it was on a Measure O, and the money should be distributed to increase STEM education throughout the district. So it's not some elite school for, a chosen few. This is really ridiculous, but let's not get off the legality and Prop 39. Let's not get into the weeds on the merits. Thank you.
Dawson. This concludes public comments for this agenda item.
All right, great, thank you. So again, we'll be making the report on the March 4th board meeting, and it covers a specific period. And so that's an important thing to look at. When we were putting the reports together, it got a little confusing. The reports cover specific periods and not overall. Mr. Evans?
Yes, I apologize. I have to leave, but I guess for the future agenda item to discuss this contingency issue with respect to the STEM high school, I don't want to get into a debate. We could go beyond what our role is of the appropriate expenditure of Measure O. So my question, I wanted to try to make it narrow, that you're spending Measure O looking for a site. What's the contingency if you can't find the site? And are there other locations that might be in for consideration for that purpose? But I want to be narrow and within the context of what our authority is.
So we could ask staff to put on the agenda for a future meeting, for the next meeting, the site selection process and what the contingencies are for the STEM school.
Yes, and I guess I would budget the meeting such that we don't spend 3 hours going through the detail of every project on the list. I think we need to be a little quicker on those and talk at a higher level perhaps. But not that I'm diminishing the work of the project managers that are doing a good job. But that was, anyway. I apologize. I have to leave.
No, thank you. We'll surely get that on the agenda. Thank you. Anyone else, any questions or comments? If not, we'll move to scheduling the next meeting. And
Yes, sir. Hi, this is Sergio. If I can provide some comments just for the new members, since there's been some comments made, just for reference, the information from prior meetings there are on the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee webpage, which includes historical data, including 2 independent legal opinions from 2 different legal counsels regarding the specific topic that we've been hearing about, the proper use of Measure O funds, specifically on new construction. Both legal counsels have agreed and that the Board of Education is fully empowered to continue using Measure O funds for new projects. In fact, this committee had a majority vote to agreeing and putting this aside. So just wanted to bring that context that keeps coming up, and we can continue providing you data and discussion. But for the new members, these topics have been many times been discussed, vetted, not only by this committee but our Board of Education and so forth. So that may help you to have a different mindset as you go back and review your information. One area that is very important again is the resolution of Measure O prior to passing Measure O. It has a list of all the projects that the board is empowered to use Measure O. And there is a specific section on page 11, page 10, that specifically talks about the STEM center. The page 12 specifically, in fact, I'll read it, says acquire land, construct new schools, and then there's more and more and more specific projects. So I just want to use that as you go back and you listen, because this is good information. That you have as part of your handbook. I just want to make that clear, Mr. Nelson, because again, this has been topics that have been ongoing many times, and we've included again legal counsel, and we end up in the same conclusion. But anyways, thank you for allowing me to make these comments.
If any of the new members want to have that agendized to go over those opinions, express their opinion, I think that's something we'll have to add as an agenda item.
Yes, I would like to add that to an agenda item to see if it's been litigated, if we can get a copy of what law firm looked at that.
Sure, I think that because it's not on our agenda specifically now, we'll ask staff to put that on the agenda for the next meeting, and at that point we can review that, having open question and answer.
Letters are located, just for reference, they're located on our website already, if you want to go on there and look them up and read them.
And again, Mr. Nelson, the responsibility of this committee is not to select projects. That's the Board of Education. But
I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying we need to agendize it so that we can have the proper discussion. So if we can just add it to the agenda, we can truly discuss it at the next meeting. All right, so we'll look to be scheduling the next meeting date. And that's normally every 2 months, if I'm correct.
It's quarterly, Mr. Nielsen, so every 3 months.
Every 3 months. So this is January, and we'll be looking to March. Is that correct?
April.
April. Thank you for the correction. So we're looking to schedule a meeting in April. So if we could, we'll just instruct staff to arrange a meeting time in April.
Well, it would be 3 months from today. Is that right?
Correct.
So the end of April, beginning of May.
Yeah, if we could shoot for the end of April, I think that'd get us back on the schedule. Perfect.
Would you like to look at April 28th? Or typically these meetings have been held on Wednesdays, but not sure if the committee would like to change the date.
No, I think it's Wednesday's better than a Friday.
Really quick,
April 28th is a very good tentative date for me. If anyone doesn't have any reservations on that date, we'll ask staff to schedule that meeting. Okay. Seeing none, please move forward and schedule that. We're looking for any committee member comments for items to be really added to the agenda or any other comments. One item I wanted to address was at the last board meeting, 2 board members voted to have the committee have more insight into membership. That failed. 2 that did not vote for that said they'd like to have that discussion. So I think that we'd like to add to the agenda to discuss the independence of the committee so we can report back to the trustees that said they wanted to have that discussion. So any other items to put on the future agendas?
Mr. Nelson, I just want to clarify the agenda item you just referenced. 2 trustees?
Yeah, two board members, or when it came to approve new members, said 2 of them voted to table the issue and have more input from this committee. That failed. That vote failed. 2 other ones, as they approved the membership slate, said they are open to discussing it in the future, discussing the independence of the committee. And so I wanted to be prepared as a committee to enter that discussion if the trustees want to have that. Does that help clarify it?
I guess, but is the board entertaining the board discussing it, or is the board requesting that we discuss it?
The 2 trustees, and maybe I should go back and get clarification before we agendize it. 2 of them said they're opening to discuss it with the committee, but were very not specific. So maybe it'd be appropriate to make the inquiry to the board and just say, what kind of discussion did you want to have?
Okay.
I'll do that.
I think that'd be helpful.
Okay, then I'll do it that way. Thank you. Anyone else with items they want to have added to the agenda?
Well, two things. I was just confused. Did the board have concerns about the selection process for this committee?
I don't want to speak on behalf of the board.
Okay.
2 of them said they wanted, it came up, and 2 of them said, I want to go back to the committee before we approve the slate. That failed on the vote. When it came up to revote, 2 of them stated, I think we should have that discussion, but we're not specific on what that meant. And so I'll ask the board to clarify what type of discussion they may or may not be wanting to have.
Okay, and the other thing I was questioning was someone said that on the website there are the 2 legal opinions from attorneys about, Measure O and its mission. And you just said we're going to have something on the agenda. You want to agendize something about that? Clear.
I wanted to have that discussion agendized so we can properly discuss it, especially for the benefit of new members who were not here when those votes and decisions took place, so that we will present the 2 opinions that were made, and I believe they were written opinions, and then any new members could ask their questions or reservations or get the clarification on those attorney opinions.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that's clear.
And Mr. Nelson, maybe it would be beneficial for staff to have the portions of the education code that established the Citizens Oversight Committee process as part of Prop 39.
We could sure add that.
I don't know if we'll need them, but if we're going to talk about what this board can and can't do, that's the law that establishes and guides this board. So I think it would be beneficial to at least have that on hand for purposes of relevancy if we're going to be discussing that.
Yeah, I think it would help, especially with new members.
Yeah.
Perfect. Great idea. Great suggestion. Is there anything else? Seeing no one wants to respond, I'll move for adjournment.
I'll second that.
All right. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much for spending your Friday night doing this, and look forward to seeing you in a few months.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for your help. Thank you for sticking around and keeping us in order. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bobby, have a good evening. Take care.